A warm and friendly hello, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Beats and Family podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in segment number 2 by Tristan Freeman. He does amazing work over at Bussin' Brackets. We're going to be chatting with him about what we all saw the first week of the college basketball season. I have to ask him briefly about what we've seen with regards to the refereeing and the amount of fouls that we have seen in the beginning part of the season, but we're going to be looking at a lot of these Tuesday games. I'm also going to be bringing up what we saw the ACC last week and some of their issues, if it might be a little bit more of a brutal year in general for the bottom half of the ACC once again, so we are going to be diving in on that and so much more in segment number 2. In the final segment, I'm going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Tuesday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at unit_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Got in a few Twitter/X questions today, one of which was why I take a lot more full games rather than first halves, as I really stay away from the first half. And the biggest reason why for me is if I were to evaluate first halves, I would need to get exclusive first half numbers because there are some teams that they're a little bit different from the first half to the second half. I would really want to be trying to hone in on those in general, and when it comes to first half lines as well, you have a little bit less to pick from because you're not able to get as many overnight lines with regards to first half. You're able to get a lot of full game lines, but not as much in the first half. So that does limit the amount of edge that you're able to get on a lot of these openers for one. Also with that, when you do take the full game, you have a little bit of a less chance of variance, which I know that some people are going to disagree because you always talk about late game fouling and how that could throw a game a little bit for a loop-de-loop, but I do think that when you have 40 minutes rather than 20, the smaller the sample size, the more likely you are to have a little bit of variance in that sample size. Just like taking 20 minutes is better than 5. Taking 5 minutes is better than taking 2 minutes. You're able to go down the list. You always want the bigger sample size because bigger the sample size, typically the more true the result that you are going to be able to get. But also on top of that, with regards to taking a look at late game fouling, that is something that I do try to account for with regards to these games as well. You'll notice a lot of times when there's a spread that I make at like -6 or something like that, I will mention, if I'm like taking a look at the over, I will mention I'm expecting some late game fouling. So that does go into account with regards to my handicap as well. And then I know that I was getting some questions as to taking a look at these totals as well, because I talked about on the podcast how to perhaps adjust to some of these totals with all the foul calls that we've been seeing this season as well, and how I take a look at unders, and if that's something that I do gravitate towards. And just in general, with regards to my handicapping, maybe this is just me, but I do gravitate a little bit more towards unders, whether that be college basketball, baseball, certainly in football if you've been taking those unders. It's been tremendous in the NFL this season, but you do notice that there are a lot of public bettors that they do like to be able to bet on points. They like to be able to take a look at overs. Really, if you want to be betting unders, if you take a look at some of these player props in the NBA in regards to NFL, you're going to get the old void the ticket crowd whenever there's like an injury or anything like that. But I do think that there's some really good value on unders when it comes to player props in general. But I do think that just across the board, you do get a little bit more value there. It is a little bit tricky with these foul calls that we've been seeing towards the beginning part of the season, but all in all, I found a lot of success taking a look at unders, and it's not like I'm just going to intentionally shade down my numbers, have like big differentials on unders or anything like that, but I do feel like there are a lot of books that they shade their numbers upward rather than downward, and I do think that when you do see some teams that they have a very good start to the season, they start out shooting like 50% from 3 in the first 3 or 4 games of the season, what comes up must come down as well. So hopefully that answered some of your questions. Like I said, anytime you have a question, always feel free to fire those in. Happy to air those out on the podcast. So let's now take a look at everything that we saw from a great college basketball Monday. Try to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Interstate rivalries are something that could trip up a lot of teams. We saw Miami have a little bit of a tough time with Florida Atlantic, and then we did see the outright loss of Villanova as they fall to the old Quake Quakers of Penn by a count of 76-72. In this one for Villanova, they were able to have a nice performance out of Justin Moore. He certainly was able to give you more. He puts in there 25 points, but for Villanova, what was the kryptonite of the team? They go 9 of 33 from 3. You take Justin Moore out of the fold, the team went as a whole 5 of 22 from distance, without a Villanova once again very good at the free throw line. And Penn, they did go 21 of 34 at the charity stripe, but 7 of 17 from three-point range. And the man that was able to get it done, it was a cooking for one, Tyler Perkins, 22 points, 6 boards. On top of that, for Penn, they were able to do a pretty nice job on the glass. They won that rebound battle by kind of 38-35. So Philly 5 matchup goes the way of Penn on their home floor as double-digit underdogs. And then for Miami, they get out with a win, but it was not comfortable against Florida International. Florida International, about a 22.5-point underdog, 86-80. They topple FIU. FIU, 11 of 33 from three-point range, but they were able to get a good solid showing out of Ontario Dean along with Deshaun Giddens. They were able to combine for 33 points for Miami. Where they were able to win this game is that they did a solid job of being able to bury 13 of their 21 threes. An average shooting night in Miami probably doesn't get the job done, but Wooga Poplar has been tremendous to begin the season. 18 points. He goes 4 of 6 from three-point range. Bentley Joseph was able to go 4 of 5 from 3. So some great three-point shooting from Miami. You probably don't want to be banking on having to go 13 of 21 from 3 to win on a night in and night out basis, but they survived. But those two underdogs in those interstate rivalry matchups, they were both able to get covers. The Florida State Seminoles, they were able to get the job done a little bit more handily, 94-67 over Central Michigan. Looks like it's going to be another rough year for the Chippewas, and for Florida State, defense is looking a little bit spotty, but you've got Darion Green, who looks tremendous, 16 points. He was able to go 4 of 9 from 3 for a Florida State team that as a whole looks like their depth is back, 12 of 28 from 3. Florida State was just completely ravaged by injuries over the last 2 seasons, so good to see them being able to find their footing once again and get the job done in rather convincing fashion. We're going to be talking to Tristan a little bit about this Pittsburgh team. Pittsburgh, they were laying in the neighborhood of about 10.5 points in this one. They were barely able to get the cover on most numbers. 86-74, they get it done against Florida Gulf Coast. How about Blake Hinson? He was able to put in there 18 points, 5 boards, at a relatively solid showing. And then the man that led off his career with a triple-double, Carlton Carrington. I know that our good friend Tristan is going to be mentioning him. 19 points, 7 assists, 4 rebounds for Pittsburgh, where they also won this game. Just 7 turnovers. Now, Florida Gulf Coast did a good job of being able to protect the ball as well, but Florida Gulf Coast also lost the rebound battle, 42-29. The Dunk City, they held within single digits against Indiana, an Indiana team of which I'm a little bit socked down on, but a relatively solid showing here against Pittsburgh as well. Florida Gulf Coast, they were pretty much in it to the end. As a matter of fact, this was about a 6-point game with about 4 minutes remaining. So credit where credit is due. Florida Gulf Coast, they don't get the cover, but they were able to hold right in there. A team that was able to hold in there as well. How about VMI? They were able to get a nice cover against South Carolina, 74-64. A little bit sock up on South Carolina with their win over Virginia Tech, but they did have a little bit of a tough time here with a VMI squad that was able to do a relatively solid job on the glass. They do lose that battle 44-40 as BJ Mack had 17 points, 13 rebounds, but they were able to do a nice job on that front. You were able to get 11 rebounds, 8 points out of Tashad Jackson. VMI probably staring at another long year out there in the SoCon, but not the world's worst showing there. This was a solid showing from Old Dominion as well. They lose, but they certainly get a cover as they lose by 9 against Arkansas, 86-77. This was also a play that was under consideration for the DK Network write-up, as I like this Old Dominion team. I didn't think they would go 11-24 from three-point range, but year in and year out, we do see Arkansas have some issues covering early on during the season, though. L. Ellis, about 8 assists, 0 turnovers, 17 points. He was all sorts of efficient, and for Arkansas, just 4 turnovers in this one, though. Old Dominion actually won the rebound battle, even with having 15 points, 10 rebounds out of Mekhi Mitchell. You did have Old Dominion do a relatively solid job there. Looks like they're going to be a little bit of a plucky team out there in the Sun Belt. You want to talk about plucky teams, we've got to talk about Michigan. I am very much stock up on them. They have to be ranked as long as they don't slip up the rest of the week. 89-73. They host St. John's. Now, St. John's did not look amazing in this game. Did have Joel Soriano go for 15 points, 9 rebounds, but even out of him, you expect a little bit more. And for St. John's, they lose the turnover battle, 16-13. And teach me how to Dougie McDaniel. 26 points, 7 assists to 2 turnovers. You didn't have a lot of scoring, but you had a lot of rebounding. Terrace Reed, this Michigan team under the tutelage right now of Phil Martelli, who's in for Juwan Howard, which you wish absolutely nothing but the best of Juwan Howard, but right now Phil Martelli, it looks like he's doing a better job with this program than Juwan Howard did. I'm just going to call it what it is, and you had Amari Burnett really come out, and he had like 13 points or something like that by the time the first media timeout went up. So this is a really talented Michigan team. Olivier Kamwa has been able to rise just the level of production that you've been able to get out of this team in general as well. I like what I'm seeing out of this Michigan team, and hey, Butler is a team I'm a little bit socked up on as well. Now, granted, it was against East Tennessee State, but I mean, this is a number that it rose up to 17.5, and Butler covered all numbers very easily, 81-47. They just completely housed ETSU, went 4 of 24 from three-point range. For East Tennessee State, they just could not get anything going. They lost a turnover battle 19-10. As a matter of fact, for ETSU, they have more turnovers than they have field goals. That is not going to cut it, to say the least. Pasha Alexander, he had just 13 points. Didn't necessarily have some sort of a rambunctious night or anything like that, but did more than enough to be able to get the job done. And how about the Minutemen of UMass being able to put up 100 on Quinnipiac? 102-81. Looks like Quinnipiac's defense has fallen off a little bit this season. And for UMass, Rasul Diggins had some question marks in the backcourt with this UMass team. He answered some questions. 22 points, 4 of 9 from three-point range for a UMass team that turned the ball over just 7 times in this one. I'm noticing that turnovers in general do feel like they're down a little bit across the board in all of college basketball. And for Houston, this team has been able to cover a lot of big numbers in the past. If you took the opening number you got to cover with Houston, this got steamed to high noon all the way up to right around about 33.5. So if you took that closing number, you weren't able to quite get there. But for Houston, on the opener of more like 25.5, you were able to. 79-48 is the final. If you're looking to take these big favorites like Houston, you probably want to pet these early. And for Stetson, they actually go 9 of 18 from three-point range. Problem is, they had 23 turnovers and 18 made buckets. So Houston just pounded them into oblivion. Houston, they went 9 of 20 from three-point range themselves. LJ Cryer looked very good in this game. 21 points, and Jamal Shedd, only 5 points, but he was able to dole out 8 assists, 5 steals. He looked very solid, and for Stetson, they just weren't able to grab a rebound in this game as well. And then we did see Nebraska. They got a win with Kasai Chomanaga back in the fold, but they were unable to cover right around about 14.5 on the close, give or take a little bit. This was a final of 64-50, as it does look like Nebraska is going to be playing a little bit more of a defense-oriented style for C.J. Wilcher. He was the main scorer for Nebraska in this one with 13 points. Chomanaga, he returned, went 3 of 11 from 3. Doesn't really do a lot in terms of rebounding or facilitating, so take note there, but Rink Mass was able to have a double-double. And then from a Rider perspective, they're actually one of my favorite teams out there in the Metro Atlantic. Need a little bit more out of the likes of Tariq Ingram, but Corey McKeithen, hopefully I said that correctly, he came in and he was able to give the team 18 points, so that was able to elevate them just a little bit. And going to need to probably do a little bit of cleanup on the podcast tomorrow. My DK Network Rider pick right now very much hanging in the balance. I took the points with Xavier. They were up against Purdue, and as I am doing this live, Xavier down by a count of 71-57. We shall see if they are able to cover this game, and they're heading to the free throw line as I do this. But for Xavier, right now it's going them 5 of 22 from three-point range, while Purdue has went 7 of 14 from three-point range. You've had Zach Edey go for 18 points, 4 blocks, 7 rebounds, and on the Xavier side of things, been able to get some relatively good production out of one of their international gentlemen, Gatis Miksa. Hopefully I said that correctly. He's a gentleman from Lithuania, has been able to give the team double figures. And for Xavier, they've done a good job of valuing the ball, winning the turnover battle by kind of 10-7. So we shall see what happens there. And right now what we are seeing in college basketball is whole lot of overs. It's something that I did address at the top, but thus far this season in college basketball, a little bit over 55% of games are going over the total. 179 overs, 146 unders, and I believe that we have had 5 pushes along the way as well. And favorites, they continue to be white hot. We've seen the cover rate for favorites come down a little bit. 169, 156, and 5 against the spread are favorites for 52%. And home teams have actually been a little bit better. Home teams covering at more like 53% against the spread, with home underdogs 23-20 thus far this season. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we all got from a nice Monday. Now let's turn it forward to Tuesday, and let's get a little bit of a Pittsburgh perspective, and let's get a little bit on the ACC with our good friend Tristan Freeman of Boston Brackets next, right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VC Family Podcast.
Sports Betting Innovative Analytics has taken the guesswork and emotion out of sports betting to bring you an innovative and trustworthy resource to enhance your journey to becoming a winning player. With industry-leading money-back guarantee options backed by their sophisticated modeling, they want to introduce you to a system that's not widely seen or available to help you beat the bookmaker. Specializing in NBA, college basketball, and WNBA, your first week is always free. Get started at SBIA1.com today.
And we're back in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VC Family Podcast. It is always great to be joined by this man, as Tristan Freeman. He does a tremendous job over at Boston Brackets. Taking a look at this game that we all know and love. I know he worked so hard this offseason to get set for the upcoming season, and right now, a lot of what he was talking about has come to fruition. He does an amazing job as well of taking a look at all the teams out there in the Pittsburgh/Pennsylvania area. And you're able to follow him on Twitter/X over at HoopsNut351 all together. And Tristan, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Greg. Appreciate it.
I appreciate you, Tristan. And Tristan, we are doing this as we are just barely a week into the season. And I know that it is very, very early, but have there been a few early takeaways for you, whether that be a team or two that has stood out or just something that you're seeing across the board?
Yeah, well, so far we've already seen more upsets than you would think, considering that the opening week was sort of bashed for not having a ton of marquee matchups. I already tweeted earlier that in both the men's and women's sports, 2 of the top 4 preseason teams have already fallen down. There's definitely the level of parity where no one's unbeatable, and we're going to see a lot of teams fall soon, even before Feast Week. And I think that's one big takeaway. Maybe one smaller is the Big Ten has struggled so far. Obviously, Purdue with Zach Edey has looked fine, although they haven't played anyone big yet, but you look at Michigan State struggles, losing to James Madison. You look at Rutgers falling to Princeton, Maryland dropping 2 straight in the Asheville Classic, including to Davidson and UAB. It's been a rough going for the Big Ten so far, and they usually handle their business in a non-conference, but so far it hasn't looked very impressive for most of the teams in there.
Absolutely, and full disclosure, doing this before that Monday game between Michigan and St. John's, because Michigan has really been a team that has stood out to me. I thought that they were being a little bit underrated in the Big Ten because I did like the addition of Olivier Kamwa. I was expecting a little bit of a jump from year number 1 to year number 2 with Doug McDaniel, but I don't know if maybe it's just me, maybe I'm just being unfair, but this team under Phil Martelli looks better than it did under Juwan Howard.
I think it's a roster with pieces that may have been underrated. I mean, Olivier Nkamwa was someone that people did have hype for, but so far averaging 25 and 8. Even I didn't expect him to have this kind of offensive output. And they scored well, although the UNC Asheville team that they credit for bashing also got handled by UNC Wilmington. So I do wonder how good they are. Them and St. John's are 2 teams that have talent, but I could see them having low floors as well. It's very interesting to see what they'll do.
Absolutely, and you've got a St. John's team that they've got a lot of talent, but the chemistry may not be there, and a Michigan team that, like you were alluding to, maybe we just slept upon just a little bit coming into the season. As Tristan Freeman, who does amazing work over at Boston Brackets, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and I do think that we need to highlight one of the teams out there in your area, and typically this is where we do talk about Pittsburgh, and I know that Pittsburgh going to be in action this week for sure, so we'll touch upon them in a minute, but do want to touch upon Duquesne, because Duquesne took on a Charleston team that coming into the year I was very high on. They had themselves a really nice win in that one, 90-72, and I just want to get your thoughts overall on this Duquesne team, because I had a little bit of worry when they had a rough go of it against Cleveland State, but that Charleston win to me was one of the more impressive mid-major wins I've seen thus far this season.
This was a game against Charleston where Duquesne's size really came through. They played 7 big men, most of them fifth-year seniors, and they was able to just wear down Ante Brozovic, Charleston's key big man. And when the shots are falling down with Kareem Rozier chipping in 20 points with Trey Clark and Dede Grant, few teams are going to be able to beat Duquesne. They don't have a ton of guard depth, but when the guards they do play are making shots, it's going to be very difficult to beat them. And Cleveland State's a fairly good team, too. I think they've looked impressive themselves. I'm very interested in what Duquesne will do this week against Princeton on Wednesday. I already mentioned that they beat Rutgers. They're a very impressive team coming off their Sweet 16 appearance. If Duquesne can beat them and go 3-0 this week, head into the Nebraska matchup, then they're going to start getting some actual national hype because this truly could be the best roster they've had in years.
Yeah, and that Duquesne versus Princeton game that is going to be coming up on Wednesday, that is going to be a good big major matchup with Princeton. They themselves having a nice win on the road against Hofstra. They knock off Rutgers. They're off to a nice start to the season as well. It's Tristan Freeman, who does amazing work over at Boston Brackets, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I did allude to it. We do have to talk a little bit about Pittsburgh. We're doing this before their game against Florida Gulf Coast on Monday. Would be a little bit surprised if they lose to Florida Gulf Coast, but Dunk City, they looked very, very pesky against Indiana, so that certainly is not a given. But what do you make out of the early start to the season that we've seen from Pittsburgh? Because with Pittsburgh, they have played against two teams, so let's call it what it is, completely overmatched. They took care of business, which, I mean, quite frankly, is more than what we could say for a lot of the teams in the ACC this far.
I mean, the biggest question coming in for Pittsburgh, and this was amplified when Dior Johnson was dismissed from the university, what was the guard play going to look like? And that has been answered in a huge way because Carlton Carrington's one of the best freshmen in the country. Became the first player in program history to have a debut triple-double in a win against North Carolina A&T, and he also had 18 points almost quietly against Binghamton, and outplayed Syracuse transfer and veteran Samir Torrance. It's been great for them. Ish Leggett, the Rhode Island transfer, also had 18 and 11 in the game, and Blake Kinson's going to be Blake Kinson. He's already averaging 20 points a game, and you're seeing the development of the Diaz-Graham brothers and Federico. Pittsburgh has plenty of size, and now that the guard play is holding up, now we can start looking at them as being a team in the upper half of the ACC that can contend for a tournament spot. We'll have to wait until their MTE during Feast Week because they have two other, I would say, gimme games. But they've looked impressive against who they've been able to play so far. And even with Isaiah Thompson coming back from Florida Gulf Coast, I don't think that you're going to see the spacing issues that plagued Indiana to keep this one close.
Yeah, and I do think that that is going to be the big key in this one as well. And when it comes to just the ACC overall, I did make a little bit of a slight jab at them. It's just been a really rough week to start the season for them. I honestly don't think that there's a lot of shame in Duke losing to Arizona. Arizona is a good team. I mean, those losses, they just sort of happened. But we both thought that Notre Dame and Louisville were going to be brutal coming into the season. They look even more brutal than maybe we even anticipated. That was not great, to say the least, to start the year. Boston College narrowly loses to the Citadel. Wake Forest got down 20 points to Elon in their first game before dropping their second game. I mean, just how do you take a look at this ACC right now? Because, I mean, it's been really a thud to begin the season for them.
Yeah, and if you want to add Clemson falling down.
The Virginia Tech was, the South Carolina too.
Yeah, I mean, Clemson almost lost to Davidson, although Davidson might be better than we thought in the A-10. But for the most part, we've seen a lot of these teams have their floors and ceilings. We've seen more of the floor so far. I mean, yeah, Notre Dame and Louisville's going to be embarrassing, but it's also they can't lose these games because if their net ranking is so horrible, all the other teams on the bubble won't benefit as a result. And as Clemson saw, just one slip-up against you can take them out of the tournament. Even with the other teams in the SEC, Big 12, and Big 10 also taking bye-game losses, they're not going to be as bad. There's a legit chance that Notre Dame, by the way, Notre Dame's non-conference schedule is actually very tough considering the roster they have, so things could get worse for them in a hurry. It's going to be difficult, and this conference is going to have to do well during Feast Week. I mean, Duke's going to have to beat Michigan State, who looks very vulnerable because they're the team in the lead. And right now, I mean, Virginia and Miami looks the most impressive, but we'll see how those teams hold up.
Yep, absolutely. And that has been just a big issue for the ACC the last few seasons because other than Duke, I mean, the big teams have been able to avoid stubbing their toe, but I feel like we talked about this a few times in the offseason, and I think it needs to be brought up again. This could be an ACC that once again they get limited teams in the NCAA tournament, because you might have a team like we were losing Clemson having a close call against Davidson, but all in all, they've been able to keep a clean sheet. You might have a rise with regards to a team like Pittsburgh, teams like this, and there's a big fear that once again they might get left out of the NCAA tournament because a ghastly loss to, say, a Louisville, a Boston College, teams like this might absolutely destroy their resume, much like it has the past few seasons.
Yeah, and a really good example of this is VCU, and I know it's out of league, but VCU lost the game to McNeese State. And the problem is McNeese State could actually be a really good team because they have a bunch of power conference transfers, but because they're in the Southland, they're almost guaranteed to be a quad 4 loss. And if that's the case, even if VCU, bounces back and gets Barstow and they're good again, that loss is going to haunt them. Really good chance that Western Carolina is going to haunt Notre Dame. Some of these other games are going to haunt some of the other teams. Like Princeton likely will not haunt Rutgers. That's why the Big Ten tends to fare out better in the postseason, whereas the ACC just loses to legitimately awful teams. If that doesn't change, and we already have 6 days of evidence to show that there's concerns, this league is going to all of a sudden be looking at themselves in January and wondering how many teams actually have a shot. And it might be at max 8, and you don't want to have it max 8 or 9 in a 15-league team, because then that means you just have a bunch of others that's just going to be nothing but dead weight that can only hurt you.
Yeah, it really is a case where, once again, man, you just look at some of these losses, and it is really going to be piling up for the ACC, and you do have your fear of that creeping forth once again, as Tristan Freeman, who does absolutely amazing work over at Bussin' Brackets, is showing to me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And when it comes to what we're all going to be seeing on Tuesday, the Gavitt games, they are going to be getting going, and we're also going to be seeing the Champions Classic as well. And I do want to get your thoughts with regards to that early game of that Champions Classic, because we did allude to losses early on by top 5 teams, and well, the top 5 teams that lost, they're going to be playing each other on Tuesday in Duke versus Michigan State. I'm not sure how you feel about it, but I have many more concerns right now about Michigan State and their 2 losses in Duke, because with Duke, I was a little bit surprised that they didn't go a little bit deeper in their bench. I do feel like they should be giving more of their guys some run. Meanwhile, for Michigan State, it almost feels like they're playing the wrong guys, because Maddie Sissoko and guys like this really don't impress me. And I take a look at the Michigan State freshmen, and I think that they're the guys that actually give them the best chance to win right now, rather than someone like Sissoko down low.
I mean, the problem is Xavier Booker looks to be lost on defense, and Tom Izzo just isn't going to play guys that he doesn't trust. Booker might have more raw talent, and I think there's a case to be made that you might want to put him on Filipowski just to match up with him athletically, but it also could work against them. And that front court matchup is going to be very interesting, because Malik Hall and Mark Mitchell are 2 guys that have sort of struggled in their own rights, and they're likely to be paired against each other depending on if Duke plays big or a little small. There's a lot of players outside of the guarantee guys like Filipowski and Walker that will come through. A lot of others got things to answer for. Will Tyrese Proctor live up to his breakout billing? Will AJ Hogarth get back in check? You mentioned the freshmen. They're the reason why we had them in the top 5, because we thought that they would give them more depth. But if they're not giving them much overall, and some of the starters are regressing, then all of a sudden Michigan State might be in more of a top 25 team like they were last year, instead of a top 5 for sure Final Four contender. And if that's the case, then the Big Ten could have some worries down the road, because then that just leaves Purdue once again as the only surefire thing.
Yeah, it's really one of those cases as well where I do think that Michigan is able to rise up, and Illinois going to have a massive opportunity against Marquette. I do think that that's a good game to take a look at as well, because I agree with you. I do think that Purdue right now looking like that surefire top team in the Big Ten, and what else you're going to be able to get from there if Michigan State loses, that's a little bit more of a roll of the dice. But with Illinois, I do think that they are a team with that potential. They're going to be going up against Marquette on Tuesday, and I do think that it is so intriguing to take a look at this Illinois team, because they're a team that feels like is really starting to buy in a little bit more on defense. And with Illinois, typically you have with a lot of teams a set system and everything like that. What I think makes Illinois so unique is that Brad Underwood, he doesn't have a set system. He really just caters everything around the talent on his roster, and it feels like he's going a little bit slower and more defense-oriented this year.
They lost some talent last year, but I would argue that the guys that replaced them are better, not only defenders, but they fit their roles better. I mean, there's no question that this is Terrence Shannon's team, and Coleman Hawkins, also plays a big part of it, but guys like Justin Harmon, Quincy Guerrier are good at their jobs. You look at Ty Rogers and Draven Gibbs-Lockhorn, they're good enough ball handlers that can take some pressure off of Terrence Shannon. But overall, this Illinois team is just going to out-athletic you. They're going to sometimes shoot you off the floor. And I think they just have a better chemistry this time around. And if that continues to work, then they can be a definite top 25 team. I'll be very interested to see how they look against Marquette, a team that brought just about everyone back and people have as a top 5 team. If Illinois can beat them, then all of a sudden we're going to have to reevaluate what their ceiling is.
Yep, I think so as well. Joining me on the show, we do have Tristan Freeman, who does amazing work over at Bussin' Brackets. And I do want to touch upon this game as well because Kansas, right now, the number 1 team in the land. We're doing this before we saw the updated poll, but if Kansas is still not number 1, that would be a massive surprise. But now they go up against a Kentucky squad that they are dealing with some injuries. So that is something certainly to take note of. But with Kentucky, the raw talent is there. And I don't think that there's any question that there is raw talent. But I take a look at this Kansas team, and I do have a few question marks with regards to how someone like a Nicholas Timberlake is going to be looking in the backcourt. But through 2 games, this team does look very, very solid on both ends of the floor.
Yeah, Kansas has probably the highest floor because of their starting lineup, because you know what Hunter Dickinson's going to give you. You know what DeJuan Harris and Kevin McCullough is going to do. The question is going to be what happens when those guys have off nights, because they don't really have a lot of depth for a variety of reasons. And if the Australian freshman Johnny Furphy is an impact player, then they're a couple of guys from being in foul trouble away from just being in real trouble. And Kentucky, even though they're missing a few bigs, they should have enough guards in their undersized lineup with Trey Mitchell at the 5 could pose problems for them. I'll be interested to see how they guard Hunter Dickinson in the game. But this could be a really interesting battle, especially with all the freshmen Kentucky has. This is going to be their first true test, and they got some really good defenders to deal with on the Jayhawk side.
Oh, they certainly do. And Tristan, I do want to get your thoughts on one more thing as well, and it's something that I picked up on the first week in the season. I don't know if you've been noticing the same thing or not, but feels like foul calls are way in the heck up this season. I cannot turn on a game and just see foul after foul after foul. What have you made out of this? And do you think that this could be similar to what we've seen in past years, where in past years there's the referees calling a bunch of fouls early on during the season, then when it gets to conference play, things taper off a little bit and they let them play a little bit more? Do you think that we might be seeing this all season long? Because typically we do see a few more foul calls in non-conference play. This year it feels like it's really on steroids.
There's usually an emphasis that referees are told to take place in the non-conference, so they're more wary of calling fouls and making sure. I think we've seen a lot of blocks called now more compared to charges since that emphasis has been cleared, so that could be part of it. And I think there's just going to be an adjustment for everyone involved that, this is, first week of the season, everyone has to get some rest out. I don't think we'll have too much fouls being called, but if this does continue, teams that doesn't have a lot of depth like Kansas or Gonzaga and other top teams, this could be a concern from them because the wrong couple of minutes could really put you at a disadvantage.
Yeah, it really can. And man, it has been one of those cases where we have just seen so many fouls called this year. So it's made it a little bit more of a rough watch in general, but what is always tremendous is listening to you and all of your great work, Tristan. You do amazing work over at Bussin' Brackets. I know you do some work over there at the Field of 68 as well with their daily newsletter and so much more. So let the good people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yes, sir. You can follow me at HoopsNut351 on X. You can also follow at Bustin' Brackets for all the latest college basketball stuff. And we're just going to be looking at the Champions Classic as well as the Gavitt games coming up.
Oh, absolutely. It is going to be a tremendous next few weeks of college basketball leading up to conference play. Tristan, he does absolutely incredible work taking a look at so many different things nationally, taking a look at what's all out there in the Pittsburgh area, and so much more. So big thanks to Tristan for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Tuesday as we hit some big shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast, Always great to get Tristan Freeman aboard. He does an amazing job over at Bustin' Brackets, taking a look at this wonderful game that we all know and love. Certainly has been doing a great job taking a look at all those teams out there in the Pittsburgh area. On top of that, does a great job taking a look at things nationally over at Fanside. It's hub for college basketball at Bustin' Brackets, so always a pleasure to get him aboard. Big thanks to Tristan for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Tuesday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that, as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter feed /X feed at @unit_D1. We are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is pretty much time order with regards to the big games involving the major conferences and then the games involving the America East, the SWAC, the MEAC, the Patriot League, the Big South, the Northeastern Conference, the America East, if I haven't said it already, Southland. Those are going to be the games with 4 digits, and those are the games at the bottom. So let's get things started with 601, 602 on the betting board. It is North Dakota St playing against UC Davis. Neutral court game out in Missoula, Montana, as North Dakota State finds themselves as underdogs anywhere between 2 to 2.5 points. So your total on this game, anywhere between 145.5 and 146. 145.5 is the max I'm willing to take the over on, but I'm willing to go in on the over with UC Davis. The team last year was a top 75 team in terms of total possessions per game, and North Dakota State, typically throughout the tenure of this coaching staff, they have been a little bit slower, but I typically notice in non-conference play, they do like to play a little bit more up-tempo, and I do think that this is going to be a relatively close game that involves some free throws, so that is why I'm going to be willing to go in on the over. But with UC Davis, I did make them the 4-point favorite. UC Davis did have a tough time with Pepperdine a few days ago, and then they do lose that game to Montana, but Montana, very solid school, and I do think that for UC Davis, their top scorer is better than that of North Dakota State, who is Broden Skunberg. With Mr. Skunberg, last season shot about 39.5% from 3 for the Bison, about 15 points, 5.5 boards. Overall, a solid game, but for Elijah Pepper, he's a guy that's just able to fill it up. Last year, 22.5 points, 6 boards, 3.5 assists, 1.5 steals per contest. You do lose guys like Christian Anigwe, who were able to lend a little bit of versatility from a season ago for UC Davis, but Ed Edbayo, he's able to do a nice job down low. He's been able to log about 6 rebounds per game after last year. He was a starter that was a little bit more of a defensive stopper. You've been able to get some nice production out of Ty Johnson as well. And then I think the big key for this team, Kane Milling. What is he going to be able to give you moving forward? Began his career in Nevada 2 seasons ago, shot 38% from 3. Last year, more around 32% from 3 as a 6'4", a little bit of a combo player. Meanwhile, with North Dakota State, you do have down low, perhaps the best true post player in Andrew Morgan, who's able to give you about 6 boards, 7 points per contest. Pops threes, but not necessarily well. And the biggest thing with this North Dakota State team, can Damari Wheeler-Thompson actually be the main facilitator for this team? Because they haven't had that in quite some time. He's been able to dole out right around 9 assists in the first 3 games of the season without really turning the ball over. But that's a big question mark that I do have with a North Dakota State team that has been a little bit disjointed in the backcourt. North Dakota State does a good job of taking care of the ball. They really don't generate turnovers, and that should allow UC Davis to be in their element and get the job done. So my total 146, so 145.5 or less. Looking at the over, and with UC Davis, willing to lay up to 3.5 with them. 603, 604 on the betting board. Morehead St is going to be playing us to Mercer. Mercer is an underdog of 2.5 to 3.5 points. Your total between 136 and 137.5. Did set Morehead St as a 3.5 point favorite. Seeing that 2.5 out there, I'd be willing to lay that. 3 is pretty much the max. I'm willing to go on this one for Mercer. Really brutal start to the season. They lose to non-D1 Clark Atlantic, the alma mater of one Bomani Jones, so shout out to them, but that said, that's not necessarily a loss that you do want to be taking. Meanwhile, got a Morehead St team that's currently without Mark Freeman. They are probably going to be without him for pretty much the entirety of the season, a very big blow, but you know what, with this Morehead St team, you do have guys that are able to fill in and hold down the 4. Riley Minix has been really good for this bunch. He's averaging a little bit over 18 points per contest, has come up from the non-D1 level, and has looked very solid. And then Drew Thelwell, he's the guy with the ball in his hands right now after last year. He was more of an off-the-ball scorer. Did average 3 assists per contest, but was about a 38% three-point shooter. He's done a good job of being able to run the offensive for Mercer. this offense is just right now all sorts of disjointed because you got Jalen McCreary down low, had about 15 points per contest last year, picking up right where he left off, but you really don't have that facilitator. You're probably going to be looking at Jock Quiones. They're going to need him to be able to dole out the ball. I don't know if that's of relation to the other Quiones who was over at Memphis, but his team has been all sorts of brutal in terms of finding that main ball handler, someone like, again, Alex Holt. I think could be able to give this team a little bit of something down low, comes over from high point, not a guy with a lot of versatility, but at 6'8", he's able to grab some rebounds, and this team in Mercer should have a little bit of advantage down low. What are you going to be able to get in outside shooting? What are you going to be able to get out of someone like a Robbie Carmody, who spent the last 4 years at Notre Dame, but spent it on their bench? I do think that with Morehead St, even with the loss of Mark Freeman, they just are a little bit better put together in the backcourt, and with both of these teams, they are more low-tempo teams. Mercer has really been looking to improve their defense over the last few seasons, so this is a total I did set at a 135.5. Here at 136, going to be taking a look at the under, and with Morehead St willing to lay up to 3 points with them. Now here comes a DK Network right pick. This is 605, 606 on the betting board. Wisconsin is on the road facing off against Providence. Providence is a favorite or an underdog, depending upon where you look. Providence as good as 1.5 point favorite, as bad as 1.5 point underdog, seeing a few pick'em prices out there as well. And then your total is anywhere between 145.5 and 146.5. The right up here is going to be on the under. I shaded this total up because we have been noticing more late game felling, so I have been going northward with these totals, and I could still only make this a 134.5. I fully recognize Wisconsin scored north of 100 points in their first game of the season against Arkansas State, but we have seen this from Wisconsin time and time again, where they play a little bit faster in the non-conference and then they just go back to being super duper slow. Wisconsin has ranked 271st or lower in terms of total possessions per game since the beginning of the 2007-8 season. That is a very long track record that spans multiple coaches. For Wisconsin, this team has always had their issues scoring on the road rather than at home as well. At home, shot about 37.5% from three-point range this season ago, and then about 31.5% from three-point range, with scoring just over 9 points fewer per 100 possessions on the road rather than at home. Now, I do like the versatility that you got out of Tyler Wall along Steven Kroll as big men, because these guys aren't going to go out there and really pop too many threes, but they do a nice job of being able to dole out the ball. They do a solid job down low. AJ Storr does give this team some nice scoring pop as well. Last season, he was over at St. John, shot about 40% from three with 9 points per contest, and has been able to give the team 32 points in the first 2 games of the season. Chucky Hepburn appears to have taken a few strides forward, but always have my question marks with Chucky Hepburn. He has been incredibly inconsistent with Wisconsin. Meanwhile, Providence, not a super up-tempo team as well. Kim English ran a system at George Mason that last few years they were 210th and 215th in terms of total possessions per game. Entering into Monday, they were 244th in this category, and they should be able to do a nice job down low with Bryce Hopkins, Josh Oduro being able to combine for about 18 rebounds per game. Both of these guys, north of 6'7", are able to pop threes. Hopkins, a better three-point shooter out of these two guys, but I do think that it is encouraging that Jaden Pierre to be able to take some nice strides forward after last season. He was a little bit of an afterthought for this Providence team, was able to dole out 2 assists, but not a lot of scoring. He's up to right around 12.5 points per contest. Devontae Gaines is a nice little stat sheet suffering. Corey Floyd can give you something on the outside, and I know that they're now calling it like a Mika Pavilion or something like that. This is still the dunk. It is still one of the most difficult places in all of college basketball to play. I did, as a result, have to set Providence as a 2.5 point favorite. I do think that Providence is still a little bit of a work in progress under the new coaching regime of King English, and I do think that English is actually getting his system in place. We have seen Providence be a little bit more of a defensive team, and they always were relatively solid on defense, even back when you had Ed Cooley in the fold. So I do feel like this total is too high, and I do think that Wisconsin gets back to their roots. My DK Network right up pick, that is on the under, set my total at a 134.5. And when it comes to Providence, made them a 2.5 point favorite. So take a Providence as a slight favorite, or outright on the money line if I'm able to get it. And my right up pick, that is on the under. 607, 608 on the betting board. It is Tennessee, and they are going to be playing us Wofford. Wofford between 28.5 and 29 point underdogs. And your total is 143.5. I like what I've seen out of Tennessee the first 2 games of the season. I think they win this game handily. this is just a couple too many points. Wofford has fallen on tough times in terms of their defense, but this is still a squad that a few years ago, we all recall they were an at-large team in the NCAA tournament that very nearly made the Sweet 16. Those guys are gone, but you do have Corey Tripp in the backcourt, who has been in the fold for quite a while for this team. Last year shot 36% from three, shooting even better this year. And it's a nice stat stuff for last year. Was able to give the team 2 assists, stealing half with 9 points per contest. This year, it's up around 4 assists, 5 boards. He's really doing it all for this team. Down low, they do take quite a few losses with the likes of BJ Mack, Messiah Jones being out of the fold, but Kyler Filowich should be able to give the team right around 5 boards and a block per contest. Meanwhile, with Tennessee, Dalton Knecht, he is connecting from 3-point range. He was able to give the team 41 points in the first 2 games of the season, and Northern Colorado a season ago shot about 38% from distance with 20 points per game. You've got Zakai Ziegler back way earlier than expected, and then Josiah Jordan James for this Tennessee team. He just is a stat sheet stuffer. This is a team that's able to go like 10 deep at this point. You're able to get good rebounding out of Jonas Adu. You're able to get Jordan Gainey to coming off the bench, be able to hit some threes. Santiago Vescovi does a good job of being able to dole out the ball. Down low, you've also got Toby Awakawa. Hopefully I said that correctly. He's able to do a nice job down low. So you've got all sorts of depth. Tennessee is going to be able to win this game and win this game by a wide margin. But with Tennessee, they are a little bit of a slower team. They do sometimes go through their scoring droughts, and just leaves you with a little bit of trepidation with laying this sort of a number. And I do think that Wofford is going to be able to do a little bit of a better job on defense this season than last year. And perennially, both of these teams, more low-tempo teams. I did set my total at 128.5. I just have a tough time with north of 140 totals at Tennessee games because Tennessee, I think, has the potential to hold Wofford below 50 points. That would mean Tennessee needs to score 90. I'm not going to be banking on that. I'm going to be taking a look at the under of Tennessee. Set them as 26.5 point favorites. So diving in on the under and taking 28 plus with Wofford. 609, 610 on the betting board. Florida Atlantic is going to be playing us Eastern Michigan. Eastern Michigan is between a 24 to a 24.5 point underdog. And your total between 145 and 147. I set Florida Atlantic at 24 exactly. At 24.5, that is my buy point on Eastern Michigan. Florida Atlantic is a tremendous school, and Florida Atlantic, since the beginning of the 2022-23 season, has been a top 10 team in terms of covering games in all of college basketball. Do have to be wondering if there's a little bit of a tax being paid right now. And when it comes to Eastern Michigan, the defense is atrocious. They were in the bottom 10 last year in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but I think that this should be fixed a little bit with John Griff coming over from Binghamton. Began his career at St. John's over at Binghamton 2 seasons ago. He was a relatively solid player before falling off a little bit last year, but his career about 37% three-point shooter. Ty Acuff, he's able to do a nice job of being able to put the ball in the basket. Last year at about 14.5 points per contest. Is a career about 34% three-point shooter, so do like what he's able to bring to the table. Now, for this Eastern Michigan team, they don't have anyone that really gives you a ton of rebounds. Gerald Billingsley, Legend Geeter, they just have not been able to get Geeter done. And for Florida Atlantic, Vladislav Golden should be able to control things down low. That first game of the season against Loyola, 5 blocks per contest, and while nobody on FAU averaged more than really 6.5 rebounds per game, each of their top 3 scorers were all back this year. They were able to give you north of 4 rebounds per game. This team just does all the little things right. Brian Greenlee is able to dole out the ball. Elijah Mitchell was dealing with a little bit of an injury going into the opening week of the season as well. He should be a little bit more healthy as well, but with this Florida Atlantic team, I do think that they're going to try to make things a little bit more slow with Eastern Michigan. Last year they did play at a breakneck pace, and without Amani Bates in the fold, I do think that they're going to be dialing back the tempo a little bit as well, because along with Bates being out of the fold, they also did lose Noah Farrakhan as well. That was their number 2 scorer for a season ago. So I do think that things are going to be dialed back a little bit, but Florida Atlantic, they were one of the top teams in the country last year in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Eastern Michigan, highly inefficient on defense. So I did set my total at a 148, and I do think that Eastern Michigan has just enough scoring to be able to cover a number north of 24. I set my line at 24, so getting 24.5 going to be one take the points with Eastern Michigan. Set my total at 148, so also going to be going in on this total over 611, 612 on the betting board. Wright State is going to be playing us to Toledo. Toledo is an underdog of between 1 and 2 points. Totals between 163.5 and 164. I also set my total at a 163.5. So we're starting to see 164 pop up, and if we continue to get 164 or north of that, I am going to be taking a look at the under right now. A little bit more of a wait and see mode with this being pretty much on my number, but if we keep on seeing this go northward, I am going to be taking a look at the under. Got a Wright State team that is very up-tempo and a Toledo team that is very up-tempo, and with Wright State, Tanner Holden, he is holding it down for this team, as he last year at Ohio State was a little bit of an afterthought. You go back to what he was 2 seasons ago at Wright State, though, a 20-point per game scorer. He and Trey Calvin, two of the better scorers that you're going to find in mid-major college basketball in the same backcourt. The big question with Wright State is, are they going to be able to hold it down low? You've got a 6'8", little bit of a combo player in Brandon Noel a season ago. Was able to shoot about 35.5% from 3. 8.5 boards, a block per contest. You do like what he's able to bring to the table, but looks like Wright State it's only going to be about a 6 or so deep team for Toledo. They've been able to show a little bit more depth than I was expecting. They are getting minutes to someone like a Ben White, who was a double-figure scorer at William and Mary the last few seasons, and you bring back Tyler Cochran. He was injured last season after coming over from Northern Illinois. This guy that at his peak, he's able to give you 15-plus points per contest. Not a good three-point shooter for a Toledo team that last season. They were number 1 in the country in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis, but they lost for A.J. Dennis. They really lost their top 5 scorers, 4 of them, with Dante Maddox, their main guy returning, who did shoot 45% from 3 last year with 11.5 points per contest. I think it's going to be difficult for him to duplicate 45% three-point shooting. Javon Simmons has come in as a freshman as well. He's been looking relatively solid as well, but I do think we're starting to get just a little bit too lofty, as I do think that both of these teams, sometimes when you have like 2 teams that play super duper up tempo, you just get a turd, like we saw with that Memphis versus Missouri game where the total didn't even get to 130. Sometimes you do see a very up tempo battle and they decide, you know what, we're going to go a little bit more opposite. And the Toledo defense actually does look a little bit improved from a season ago. Wright State certainly does not, as they gave up 105 points, night number 1 against Colorado State. But I do think that they're going to have a little bit of a better effort here for Toledo. I do think that they're going to have a little bit of a tough time matching up with that duo in the backcourt. I did set Wright State as a 1.5 point favorite. This was an opener of 1, and if we're able to continue to have 1s out there, 1 to lay it with Wright State. Anytime you get north of 2, that is my take on Toledo. But right now, I'm mostly seeing 1s, and I would be willing to lay that 1 with Wright State. I do think that the Nutter Center is a relatively good environment, so looking to lay that point with Wright State, and with this total at a 164 or higher, going to be taking a look at the under. 613, 614 on the betting board. This is at the United Center in Chicago. Michigan State and Duke are doing battle. Duke a 3 to 3.5 point favorite. Your total is between 142.5 and 143.5. I set Duke as a 3.5 point favorite. So 3 is a max I'm willing to lay with Duke, but I'm going to be willing to lay it. Both of these teams bring back so much from a season ago. I feel like Duke has more overall talent. Michigan State, I do think that they have the coaching advantage over John Shire. It's not to disrespect John Shire. It's to show just admiration in general for what Tom Izzo has been able to do. And we were talking about it a few days ago and just throughout this podcast as well with Tristan Freeman. I do think that with Michigan State, perhaps the younger guys give this team a little bit of a better chance to win. A.J. Hoggard last year, he was able to give the team 6 assists per contest. He's a solid scorer. I like what he's able to do in the backcourt, but Mehdi Sissoko has just not really been efficient out there on the floor. He's been able to give the team 7 rebounds per game, but I do think that they're more talented player, and the guy that gives them a better chance to win when he's out there on the floor is Cohen Carr. You're able to couple that with what you're able to get out of Xavier Booker, as well as 6'11" guy that's able to do just so much down low. I think that these guys will be very hard for Duke to match up with, because you do have a 7'1" gentleman in Kyle Filipowski, who he has been tremendous to start out the year. Duke lost that game against Arizona, but not due to Filipowski, as he's been able to give the team 50 points and 15 rebounds in their first 2 games of the season. Do have to question why we haven't seen this Duke team go to the bench a little bit more. They do have guys like a Kristen Reeves, who's 7'1" and is able to help out down low. I think this team could take a little bit of a different dynamic if Jalen Blakes is able to get out there a little bit more, who did see some minutes last season, didn't see a ton of minutes, but he had his moments of brightness for the team as well. So I do think that that's going to be a little bit of a key. And then for Michigan State, their main closer is Ty Walker, who's been able to give the team 49 points in the first 2 games of the season. And Michigan State is going to shoot it better from three. Last year, they were a top 5 team in terms of three-point shooting percentage, and you knew that might be a little bit of an aberration. Right now, they're 2 of 31 from three-point range. Literally, if you put a blindfold on these guys, I do think that they would shoot a little bit better from three-point range. So I do think that that is going to be going a little bit northward, though. Duke, ever since John Shire's taken over, they've been more of a defense-oriented team. Michigan State, not an up-tempo team as well. They're going to be out there in a neutral court environment where it is very much more difficult to shoot rather than one of these true home environments. So I did set my total at 139.5. I'm going to be taking a look at the under, and with Duke willing to lay up to 3 and not a half a point more with them. 615, 616 on the betting board. IUPUI, it's a road face-off against Indiana State. The Sycamores are between 13.5 and 14-point favorites, and your total on this game, it is 148 to 148.5. With Indiana State, made them a 15.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Now, with IUPUI, they look a little bit more promising. They were able to get that nice road win against Valparaiso, which Valparaiso, not the world's greatest team, but you know what? Any sort of a road win you're able to get if you're IUPUI, you take it and you be happy with it. And with this IUPUI bunch, they do have Jalen Counter back in the fold as well, and he's been able to counter what opponents have been able to do with being able to log in their 28 points in the first 2 games of the season last year. Was able to give out a little bit over 3 assists per contest. So now with Monroe back in the fold, you've actually got a little bit of something in the backcourt. Now, with Indiana State, they should be able to control things down low. John Agabunu should be able to give you a little bit of rebounding for IUPUI, but this team is really going to struggle in the post. Meanwhile, you've got Robbie Avila, who he is back from a season ago. He has some very good versatility, has yet to be able to get out there on the floor for Indiana State this season, so going to be wanting to check in on his status because I do think that there's a chance that might be missing this game as well, but last season was able to log about 10.5 points, 4 boards. If they're able to get him back for this one, that'd be absolutely massive, but you're able to couple that with the fact that Jason Kent is someone who at 6'8", has some good versatility. Pops threes, not necessarily at the world's greatest clip, but he's able to give you a little bit of rebounding. He's able to stretch the floor. I like what he's able to provide. And then Julian Larry, just a good facilitator of the ball, 3.5 assists per contest last season, while doing a nice job not turning it over, being able to generate about a steal and a half. I do think that that's going to take it out of an IUPUI team that still doesn't necessarily have ideal depth, still is going to need a whole heck of a lot of something down low to be able to elevate this team. Vincent Brady II is a relatively decent outside shooter, but with IUPUI, this is also still one of the most shotty defenses in all of college basketball, but for Indiana State, even though they do play a little bit more up-tempo, they have been a top 60, top 75 team in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis over the last year plus as well. So this is a spot where I'm going to be taking a look at the under. I set my total at a 147.5, and when it comes to Indiana State, I want to lay up to 15 with them. 617, 618 on the betting board. West Virginia plays those to Jacksonville State. Jacksonville State between a 9 to a 10-point underdog, and your total is between 137.5, seeing a stray 138 out there as well. And with West Virginia, I did set them as 11-point favorites. I'm going to be willing to lay it. West Virginia, a less than savory loss a few nights ago against Monmouth, and with this West Virginia team, they are still going to be without Kirk Risa. That is a big loss for them. At the same time, too, should see Jesse Edwards be able to just manhandle things down low for West Virginia, as he's been able to give the team in their first 2 games of the season 26 rebounds, average a double-double over at Syracuse last year with a steal and a half, 2.5 blocks per contest. So I do think that West Virginia going to need to go with a little bit more of an defense-oriented approach here, but you do have someone in Quinn Slazinski, who at 6'9", does a nice job of being able to stretch the floor. He, over at Iona last season, just was unable to get out there on the floor, limited to 7 games. Season before, shot about 34% from three-point range. He has been able to hit some threes as far this season for West Virginia. West Virginia has been able to get some good rebounding out of him as well. And for Jacksonville State, they bring in Kai Tandy, who was over at Xavier a season ago. He's put in there 32 points in the first 2 games of the season for Jacksonville State. The biggest woe for the team last few years has been turnovers. They've had 31 turnovers in the first 2 games of the season thus far. They had 13.2 turnovers per contest a season ago, despite being a little bit more of a lower tempo team. They did have to replace a lot of guys like Damari Keys, Skylar Potter from a season ago. So they're very much looking to someone like Travis Roberts to be able to elevate this team and done a nice job being able to bring in their non-D1 talent. And Juwan Purdue, I do think should be able to do a nice job down low last season. Was able to give the team 8.5 points, 6 rebounds per contest. But for Jacksonville State, they have been getting carved up a little bit on defense. They appear to be a bit more content to go a bit more up-tempo this season than in past years as well. Now, their numbers did get hiked up a little bit by the fact that their game against Utah Tech did go to overtime, but for West Virginia, I do think that they're going to be playing a little bit faster in this one. First 2 games of the season came against Monmouth and Missouri State, 2 teams that last year were 2 of the slowest in all of college basketball, so I think that has warped their numbers just a little bit. I set my total at a 143, so I'm going to be willing to take a look at the over, and with West Virginia, I think that they do dominate the glass, allowing them to be able to win by double figures, willing to lay up to 10.5 with West Virginia, and I'm going to be taking a look at the over. 619, 620 on the betting board. Virginia is going to be playing us in North Carolina A&T. A&T is an underdog of 30 to 31 points, and your total on this game between 136.5 and 138. Not to say that I really love North Carolina A&T's outlook. This bunch is probably going to be one of the worst teams in all of college basketball. I'm going to call it what it is, but this is a little bit too big of a number against a Virginia team that they always play that slow, methodical style, and now they're without K.A. Clark from a season ago. Reese Beekman, solid player. He's thus far this season has been able to give out 12 assists to 2 turnovers, actually 1 turnover to begin the season, so he's been highly efficient on that front, but you do have to wonder how all these moving pieces are going to fit together. They lose a lot of size down low with Jaden Gardner, Francisco Cafaro, guys like this being out, so they're looking at Jacob Groves, they're looking at Blake Buchanan to be able to hold things down low for North Carolina A&T. They aren't necessarily the world's greatest low post team as well. You are getting a few rebounds right now out of Evan Joyner, and I do think that Jeremy Robinson, the 6'6" combo player, might actually be a sneaky good rebounder for the team after he was a part-time starter a season ago that was trying to spread the floor as a career, about 34% three-point shooter, but I do think that A&T has just enough to be able to hold in this game. Landon Glasper, he comes in from the non-D1 level. He's been able to put in their 38 points first 2 games of the season. Now, for A&T, they're shooting 34% from the floor, 27.5% from 3, but only turn the ball over about 8.5 times per game. It tells me that North Carolina A&T content to play a little bit more slowly. Granted, their first 2 games of the season were against Pittsburgh and UNC Greensboro, but feels like they're content to play a little bit more slowly. Virginia, they gave up 50 points in that first game against Tarleton St. Now, they did allow 70 over to Florida, but I do think that this game is going to be significantly more calmed down, and I do think that Virginia, after they got a little bit out of sorts in that game against Florida, they're going to be back to playing slow and controlled in North Carolina A&T. Call it what it is. A offense that, while they don't turn the ball over, they have some of the worst shooting in all of college basketball. So, do think that the number has gotten up a little bit too high. Set mine at a 28.5. Going to be willing to take 30 plus here with North Carolina A&T, and set my total of 128.5, so also diving in on the under. 621, 622 on the betting board. It is Harvard and the Smart Kids playoffs to Northeastern. Northeastern between 4.5 and 5-point underdogs. Your total is anywhere between 134.5 and 136.5. Seeing a straight 5.5 out there as well, and either way, going to be willing to lay it. I did set Harvard at a 7-point favorite with Harvard. Lots of moving parts on this team. They do lose Chris Ledlum from last season, but Northeastern just has not been able to elevate after many, many years of, going to call it what it is, mediocrity to, worse than mediocrity. For Northeastern, they are going to have a nice little post player in this game who comes over from Notre Dame in Chris Doherty. He's been able to give the team about 8 rebounds per contest. After 2 seasons ago, he was great. 12 points, 9 boards, very nearly a steal per contest, a block per contest. Was able to do a nice job there. Last year was just a loss year with him being injured for half the campaign and playing while injured. He's back to full force this year, but Malik Mack on the flip side for Harvard has really impressed me. A stud freshman who has come in the first 2 games. He's been able to log 33 points, 10 assists, doing a solid job taking care of the ball for Harvard team that they've got their issues with regards to 3-point shooting, but they should be able to play some tough, tenacious defense like they did a season ago. I expect some strides forward from Justice Ejabor. Hopefully I said that correctly. The 6'10" gentleman who was highly touted coming out of high school during the class of 2021. Feels like he's finally reaching his potential as a good 6'10" big man. And for Northeastern, the team has had a really tough time finding a main facilitator ever since they lost Ty Walker. I do think that they've got something with Joe Pridgeon. Go back to what he did during the 2019-20 season when he was in the Patriot League. 17.5 points per contest on 43% 3-point shooting with about 2.5 assists, 7 rebounds per game as a true freshman. He has regressed from there because he's been dealing with a lot of injuries, what have you, and then you've got the likes of Harold Woods, Masai Troutman in the backcourt combining for about 20 points. I think these guys can elevate. And Northeastern has some okay three-point shooting. It's not necessarily great three-point shooting. I do think that the defense of Harvard is going to be able to win out. I do think that this total is set just a little bit too low because Northeastern has honestly been very shoddy with their defense. And while Harvard is still not a great shooting team, they're a better shooting team than they were a season ago, and I do think that this game is going to be close enough to warrant late game fouling, so I did set my total at 137, going to be taking a look at the under, and with Harvard, made them a 7-point favorite, so willing to lay 4.5 to 5.5, and taking a look at the total over as well. 623, 624 on the betting board. Oakland is going to be playing us a Bowling Green. Bowling Green is a very small underdog, finding them between a pick 'em to a 1.5 point underdog. Totals between 143.5 and 144. I set my total at a 156.5. I'm going to be taking a look at the over. Oakland has played a little bit more slowly the first 2 or 3 games of the season. Oakland under Greg Campy, though, they typically run it, they typically gun it, and this Todd Simon style that is coming over to Bowling Green is very much like what we saw with the old Bowling Green style, where they were one of the top teams in the country in terms of possessions per game. I think Bowling Green speeds this thing up, and I think that Oakland, after they decided that they were going to play slowly against the 2 Big Ten teams that they face in Ohio State and Illinois, they get back to their roots and they get back to running it and gunning it. You do have Trey Townsend for this Oakland team that has good versatility. He's been able to log 18 points, 9.5 boards to begin the season after last year. Shot 38.5% from 3 with more like 7.5 boards per game. I like what he's able to bring to the table. Rocket Watts is just useless for Oakland. I'm going to call it what it is. I mean, man, this guy really fell off a cliff after he had one good freshman year over at Michigan State. But, I mean, the rest of the backcourt, not too bad. Blake Lampman is a guy that's able to give you some threes, a little bit of facilitation. You've gotten some good scoring out of the non-D1 transfer. And Jack Golke, he has come in and is able to give the team 24 points in his first 2 games of the season. For Oakland, they're doing a nice job turning it over just 9.5 times per contest. Meanwhile, you've got a Bowling Green team that, along with Todd Simon, he did bring with him Jason Spurgeon, a guy that's saying 6'10", 6'11", is able to pop some threes, is able to lend some good versatility, and then the backcourt, a little bit more makeshift. You've got Dejon Humphrey who comes in from Holy Cross. He was out the entirety of the 2022-23 campaign after over at Holy Cross. Shot in the mid-30s from three-point range, went down to the non-D1 level for a season and now is resurfacing. You've got Rashawn Agee, who's back from a season ago. Not necessarily a versatile big man, but a guy that's able to do a nice job down low. Is used to being an up-tempo style. But I do think the big question for Bowling Green, are they going to be able to have a main facilitator in Marcus Hill, who came over from the non-Division I level? And I mean, thus far it's looked relatively solid, but you do have your question marks with a Bowling Green team that clearly wants to play up-tempo. They're doing a good job of being able to value the ball as well, but I do think that if though Bowling Green gets their tempo, just because they've got a lot more moving parts than Oakland does from the season ago, Oakland going to be able to win this game with the chemistry. I set Oakland as a 4.5 point favorite, wanted to lay the small number with the Grizzlies at home. Did set my total 156.5. Again, this just feels like a very oddly low total, so we're going to add the over, and I am going to be willing to lay the points with Oakland. 625, 626 on the betting board. It is George Washington playing us to Hofstra, the pride of Hofstra, anywhere between pick'em to a 1 point underdog. Also seeing them in some spots as a 1 point favorite. Your total is between 159.5 and 161. Did set my total at a 150. A lot of people forget Hofstra in the back half of the season last year was in conference play a top 25 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. I recognize that they do lose Aaron Action Estrada from a season ago, but I do think that this team is going to be able to bear down on defense. And for George Washington, after they were about as useful as a poopy flavored lollipop on defense a season ago, I think that they have gotten it through their skulls that they need to play a little bit more defense. You saw that opening night when they gave up 44 points to someone else. So set my total 150, diving in on the under, but I do like Hofstra in this spot. I'm going to be taking them outright on the money line with George Washington. If they still had someone like a Hunter Dean in the fold to be able to do a good job down low, I think I'd be able to be willing to take them. But Silas Sunday, I think that this man is going to be able to perform not just on Sunday, but also on Tuesday to be able to provide some nice step down low for Hofstra. He was a little bit of an afterthought last year at Iona, but at 7 feet tall, he's been able to give the team 7 rebounds in his opening day performance. So, I mean, that's something that's very big for this team. And then you've got on the backcourt, Tyler Thomas along with Darlstone Dunbar, 2 of their top 3 scorers from a season ago. Both of these guys had 12 plus points per contest, and you still have a good facilitator even with a Estrada out of the fold. Jaquan Carlos, he last season doled out about 4.8 assists per game. Not too much of a primary scorer. Not a bad three-point shooter as well. He's a career about 33 or so percent three-point shooter, but only logged about 6.5 points per contest. He's looking to get others into the fold, and I do think that you could get a little bit of something out of German Plantikidov. Hopefully I said that correctly, who last season was able to give this team 5 points per contest. Was able to provide a little bit of versatility at 6'6" coming in from Belarus. And for George Washington, you're really relying upon James Bishop III to put the team on his back. Average about 20 points per contest a season ago. Good primary facilitator as well. And then you do have Maximus Edwards to be able to help out. Was able to give the team 6.5 boards and 1.5 points, shot in the mid-30s from three-point range, but there's just not a ton down low for the team. And George Washington last year really dealt with a little bit of lack of depth. They're trying to give their guys a few more minutes, like a Trey Autry. I don't know if that is of relation to the other Autry that is currently over there at Syracuse, Benny Schroeder, but I just don't think that these guys are up to snuff for George Washington, and I like the just star-studded backcourt that you do have with this Hofstra team. So I did set my total at 150, diving in on the under. Hofstra not necessarily a super-duper up-tempo team, and I'm going to be willing to take Hofstra as a pick-em / as a money line underdog. Did set them as a 2-point favorite. 627, 628 on the betting board. Temple, we give our Delane Kiffin. Go Owls. They're on the road. They're facing off against Drexel. Drexel is a favorite of any between 3.5 and 4 points. Totals between 138 and 138.5. For Drexel, I did set them as 2.5 point favorites. So now that we are north of 3, I am going to be willing to take the points with Temple. Temple brings in Adam Fisher, who did a very good job of coaching up that Penn State team. Now, this team is a little bit bare bones, but bring back Heiser Miller. Heiser Miller last season was just a king of versatility. Not a primary scorer or anything like that, but he gave the team like 8.5 points. He would chip in there about 4 boards, 4 assists, a steal, shot in the low to mid-30s from three-point range. I like what he's able to bring to the table. And then on top of that, you've got Jaleel White back as well, who was able to be another one of those good, versatile guys. Now, in terms of the post, Amari Williams, he's going to be able to control that. Over at Drexel a season ago, he logged a little bit over 2 blocks, 2.5 assists, a steal and a half, 14 points per game. But got a Drexel team that they do have their issues in terms of three-point shooting percentage. You do have Justin Moore, who's able to give you more, as he last season was able to do a nice job being able to dole out about 3 assists per contest. Dealt with a little bit of an injury last year, and you could tell how different the team was when he was out of the fold. But you need Yime Butler to really be able to become a little bit more than just a spot-up shooter. Last year, 8.5 points on nearly 45% three-point shooting, but he really doesn't lend anything other than that shooting. You're going to also need a bit more out of Mate Okoro's, who has been able to give the team 2 points in 2 games after last season. He was a part-time starter. That was relatively solid. Last 2 years has been averaging about 5-6 points per game, a career 38% three-point shooter, so they do need a little bit more there for Temple. Even though they did lose a lot of their rebounding from a season ago, they bring in 6'10", 6'11" Steve Settle III, who popped threes last year. Not necessarily at a great clip. I think that he's going to be utilized a little bit more down low for this Temple team. Temple, they like to be able to play a lot of positionless basketball. It seems like they've got a lot of guys that they're able to look to for some good shooting in general, like Matteo Piccarelli, comes in from UMBC, and I do think that that's going to keep Temple in shouting distance. Drexel, one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball a season ago, that really held their head on defense. Temple, I think that they're going to be a team that is efficient on offense, but I also think that they're going to be playing at a very slow tempo as well. So I did set my total at 130.5. I'm going to be diving in on the under and getting 3 or more of Temple. Going to be willing to take the points. 629, 630 on the betting board. Ole Miss is playing out to Detroit. Detroit is between a 19.5 to a 20.5 point underdog. Your total is between 144 and 147. So a little bit all over the map. Did set my total out of 143. Diving in on the under. Chris Beard's teams, they always like to be able to hang their head on defense, be able to play a little bit more of a slow and controlled style. And you've got a Detroit team that has been ghastly on defense really ever since this regime has been taking hold with Mr. Davis in there. It's been not so great, to say the least. So you do have Jaden Stone, and I do like Mr. Stone and what he's able to provide in terms of an offensive perspective for this Detroit team. Last year, before getting injured after 13 games, was shooting 52% from 3 with 14 points, 5.5 rebounds per contest, and he has been picking up right where he left off the season ago. The problem is, he really doesn't have a lot of help right now. You don't have much down low for this team. You're going to be looking to the 6'11", 6'10" guy in Otan Janovic, who began his career over at Tulane and Vanderbilt. Just has never really been able to get out there on the floor. Very raw big man going up against an Ole Miss team that they already own some guys that are two-time transfers that have yet to be able to get their waiver. You have not seen Musa Cisse thus far this season. Brandon Murray, who knows if we're going to be seeing him at all this season, but you do have Alan Flanagan, and Flanagan has good versatility, 6'6". A season ago was able to average double figures over at Auburn. A career about 30% three-point shooter, so he doesn't take the top off of a defense like that, but he is able to give you a little bit of facilitation. In a good year during the 2020-2021 season when needed. He was able to give out 3 assists per contest, and that should help take the load off of Jalen Murray, as Murray comes over from St. Peter's, who's a little bit of a part-time starter, and I think that St. Peter's doesn't realize what they lost because he has been able to do a nice job of being able to control this Ole Miss offense. Couple that with the fact that you do bring back guys like Jamin Brakefield, Matthew Morrell, who are able to be nice go-to scorers, and for Ole Miss, Jamarian Sharp at 7'5" should be a complete eraser for this team as well. I do think that for Ole Miss, they are going to be able to do a good job on defense, and because I do think that Sharp is going to be very sharp with being able to deny Detroit and Ole Miss. As a result, they are going to be able to guard the paint very easily. That allow them to close out on those Detroit threes. That's going to keep this game low scoring and allow Ole Miss to win by 20 plus. Set my line at 23. Going to be willing to lay with Ole Miss. Did set my total more around to 143 as well. So diving under and willing to lay the points with the Rebels. 631, 632 on the betting board. Oklahoma plays us to Texas State. Texas State between 14 and 15 point underdogs with your total between 134 and 135.5. And with Texas State, set them at 17.5 point underdogs. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Oklahoma. I just really don't like this Texas State team this year. Texas State always perennially one of the slower teams in all of college basketball, and you know what you're getting in terms of a Porter Moser team. They're going to be playing more slow. They're going to be playing under control as well, but I do think that they're just, for lack of a better term, going to be able to suck the life out of Texas State. A bunch that they just really relied upon Mason Harrell last season. With him being out of the fold, you can tell that this is a little bit of a rudderless ship in terms of backcourt. You do have Tyrell Morgan down low. He was good last year with about 9 points, 6 boards. I like what he's able to provide in the post, but for Oklahoma, I do think that you're going to be able to have Otega Owe, hopefully I said that correctly, be able to get throw things down low. He was a little bit of a part-time starter a season ago that was able to come on strong towards the back half of the campaign and just in general when he was able to get minutes. But on top of that, you've got John Hughley, and if he's able to get back to what he was 2 seasons ago at Pittsburgh when fully healthy during that 2021-22 campaign, 15 points, 8 boards out in the ACC, and he should be able to completely dominate in the post. On top of that, you bring in Latrey Dothard, who's a good three-point shooter coming in from Utah Valley. I've got my question marks with the Oregon transfer, Rivaldo Suarez and Javion McCollum coming in from Siena, but you certainly do have a guy that is a breakout candidate, in my opinion, in Milos Uzan. A little bit of an underwhelming first 2 games of the season, but last season had 7.5 points, shot 41% from 3, just looked like he was getting better and better as the season went along, and Texas State just really doesn't have much to be able to maintain in that backcourt. Texas State, they're going to be trying to play that slow, controlled style, and they do get a little bit more out of Christian Turner down low as well, a guy that comes in from Troy after he was a starter a season ago, but once again, not a guy that's going to be lighting it up from 3-point range. Not a guy that's going to be able to help out in the backcourt. And it's a little bit of a interesting ordeal with Josh Ogaro coming back after I believe he began his career at Oklahoma, but never really played for Oklahoma. Spent a little bit of time with San Jose State, but I do think that Oklahoma State going to take it to a Texas State team. I think is once again going to be slow and controlled. Oklahoma under Porter Moser, they certainly have been slowing down their tempo as well. So I set my total at 127.5. I just flat out don't think that Texas State going to do their part with this total. So looking at the under, I'm willing to lay up to 17 with Oklahoma. 633, 634 on the betting board. Northwestern is going to be playing us at Western Michigan. Western Michigan, an underdog of between 21 and 22.5 points for total between 136.5 and 138. I did set my total at a 137, between 136.5 and 138. Personally, I would rather have the 138 under rather than the 136.5 over, just because with Northwestern, they're more of a slow and controlled team, and Northwestern was very good with their defense a season ago, and I fully expect them to be once again this season as well. They were a top 35 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, going up against a Western Michigan team that now they get B. Artist White back at the fold, who I remember 2 seasons ago was able to log about 14.5 points per contest, was a solid 3-point shooter, and dealt with all sorts of injuries, and it's kind of what it is for B. Artist White. A bad shot for him might be better than a good shot for one of his teammates, because there's just not much in the backcourt for Western Michigan. They actually do have a little bit down low and Titus Wright, like what he's able to provide after last season. He logged about 5 boards, 8 points per contest, but you're going to be looking at Seth Hubbard, really looking to take the edge off with Hubbard. Season ago, did shoot about 42.5% from three-point range. He was able to chip in there 7.5 points per contest, but now he's in a little bit more of a primary role, and for Northwestern, Boo Buie, good on defense, very good on offense as well for a Northwestern team that was in the top 3 in the country last year in terms of fewest turnovers on a per-possession basis, so very efficient. You've got on top of that Brooks Barnheiser, who it really looks like is taking the next step forward down low. Last year, 7.5 points, 5 boards per contest. He's generated 6 steals in the first 2 games, 23 rebounds. He looks to be a nice go-to guy for this team. And then I don't think he's going to put up big numbers, but Blake Preston is just a good fit in general. Coming over from Liberty, where he was a part-time starter last year, didn't put up monster numbers, but part of a Liberty team that plays much like Northwestern. They play slow, under control, efficient. They do the little things well, and I think that is what Northwestern is going to be harking on. And I think with Western Michigan having all sorts of problems out there in the backcourt, and Northwestern being once again a sure-handed team on defense, allowing 66 points of fear in the first 2 games of the season, they're going to be able to keep things a little bit more lower scoring against a Western Michigan team that tends to get out of sorts in the backcourt. Did set my total at 137, so at 138, diving in on the under with Northwestern, willing to lay up to 22.5 with them. 635, 636 on the betting board. Texas A&M is on the road facing off against SMU. SMU between 5.5 and 7.0 home underdogs. Your total is between 141.5 and 142. SMU I set as a 4-point underdog. I'm going to be willing to take the points. This just feels like one of those classic Texas A&M games where they win and they win ugly. That is a lot of what we do see out of Buzz Williams' coach team. So I did also make my total a 140. Now, with Texas A&M, they are going to have the best go-to scorer in this game. That would be Wade Taylor IV, and that's not a knock on what Zarique Phillips is able to provide to this SMU team. With Phelps, he's been able to log about 14 points per contest, but doesn't have quite the 3-point shooting that you'd like. With Wade Taylor IV, last season shot more around 35.5% from 3, 16 points, 4 assists, just got better as the season went along. And for Texas A&M, you've got absolutely tremendous depth with this bunch. Mandy Obaseki is back after he was a good 3-point shooter for them a season ago. You got Tyrese Radford, Henry Coleman, a pair of guys that last season gave you about 10 points, 5 boards. Eli Lawrence comes in from Middle Tennessee to provide some defense. So I like what you're able to get as a whole on this team. Though I will say Chuck Harris, he makes an SMU team that was horrible on offense last year, about 300th in the country in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis, significantly better. Career mid-30s 3-point shooter, has been able to deliver 36 points in the first 3 games of the season, and I do think that this SMU team is going to be able to hold up down low. Samuel Williamson has been in college basketball for about 37 years, but he's a former top 50 recruit that's able to bang down low. Keon Ambrose Hilton, he's a former top 200 recruit that's able to give you a little bit of ability as well. And if you can get Ricardo Wright going, as he has just been out of sorts ever since he got to SMU, but 2 seasons ago, Marist was a primary scorer that was able to shoot about 37.5% for 3, 13.5 points per game. You're staring at something with this SMU team. I do think that with Texas A&M, in the end, their depth is going to be a little bit too much, and they are a pretty stout defense. But SMU looking relatively solid on the defensive side of things as well. This is a total I did set out of 140. I think that this is going to be a bit more of a grinder game despite late game fouling. I made this total 151.5, so now that we're getting to 152 and north of that, I'm going to be willing to dive in on the under. The bookmakers made the opener the same as I made my total at 151.5, and being bet up, I think that a lot of people are reacting to what we saw first week of the season with all the added whistles, and I do think that that's going to provide a little bit of value on these unders. And with this South Alabama team, I did have to set them as an underdog of 23.5 points. Alabama just feels like it's currently on a seek and destroy mission, and love what I've seen out of Grant Nelson. A little bit of an up transfer coming over from North Dakota State, but at 6'11", he's able to handle, he's able to rebound, he's able to pop a few shots from the outside as well. And then Aaron Action Estrada. I know that the first time he went up to the power conference level over at Oregon didn't work out well, but he's come in from Hofstra where he was logging about 20 points, 5.5 boards, 4.5 assists, and he has been able to duplicate that. He should be able to play in tandem a little bit better with Mark Sears, as Mark Sears has looked very solid despite the fact that he began the season with a little bit of an ailment. I do have my question marks with Latrell Wrightsell in the backcourt, but I also do think that you should be seeing more moving forward out of Friedland Griffin as well, a pretty highly touted prospect that last season was a nice little 6th, 7th man for this Alabama team. Meanwhile, for South Alabama, they lose pretty much 4 of their top 6 scorers from a season ago. Judah Brown has been able to put in their 14 points per game, but South Alabama team. They got off to about as brutal of a start as you can get. They won against Buffalo, but they lost at home to non-D1 Mobile. Not the worst non-D1 school, but losing to a non-D1 school, that's not great to say the least. Now, this is an interstate rivalry, so you know that this team is going to be up for it. And I do think that Thomas Howell going to be able to hold his own a little bit more down low. 6'8" gentleman that comes in from Louisiana Monroe, where last season he had 9.5 points, 8 boards. Became actually a relatively solid three-point shooter as well, but with this Alabama team, you just have swarms of guys coming at you. South Alabama typically likes to play a little bit more slow and controlled. Alabama, we know that they're looking to run it and gun it, and Alabama is one of those few teams in college basketball in which typically it's easier to slow down the fast team. They're able to speed up slow teams, and I do think that Alabama certainly going to be doing that. Alabama not quite as great defensively this year as they were a season ago. I think we maybe went a little bit too far with this total. Like coming into the season, I would have set this total below 150, so now getting north of 152, going to be taking a look at the under, but with Alabama, willing to lay up to 23 with them. 639, 640 on the betting board. Vanderbilt plays us at UNC Greensboro. Greensboro is a 3.5 to a 4-point underdog with your total between 141 and 142 with Vanderbilt. So I thought that's 2-point favorites. Don't want Greensboro outright on the money line. I could see Vanderbilt just somehow, some way being able to claw this one out over there at Memorial Gymnasium, which is a very weird home court to play on, by the way. But that said, with this UNC Greensboro team, I do think that they're going to hang in there. Their coach, Mike Jones, you're going to ask who, and I say Mike Jones, has been able to do a good job of having this team be very much of a defense-oriented school. Now, first game against North Carolina A&T was harebrained, 94-70. I don't think we're going to see that duplicate. Mike Jones, throughout his coaching career, whether that be at Radford, whether that be at UNC Greensboro, has been very much of a defensive just tacticianer. And for Greensboro, they went 15 of 29 from three-point range in that first game. So I don't think that that's going to duplicate. But you've got the Langley brothers and Keyshawn and Kobe Langley. Kobe, he does a little bit of a better job of being a facilitator for the team last year, about 3.5 assists, right around 2 steals per contest. And then Keyshawn Langley is more of your go-to scorer a season ago. Was able to log a double-figure amount of points, shot 42% from three-point range. They do lose a little bit from down low, but the VCU transfer, Michael Jones-Brown, is able to give you some nice production as well. Last year, logged about 10 points per contest as a 6'8", do-it-all sort of player. And for Vanderbilt, they've been dealing with some strange injuries, to say the least. Colin Smith has been out of the fold for this team. Lee Dort has yet to see the fold. Tyron Lawrence is out as well. I'm assuming these guys out until further notice because Vanderbilt has been very hush-hush about it. You have yet to see Van Allen Lubin as well, which gotta wonder if there's maybe something that happened behind the scenes in terms of discipline or something like that, because there was nothing reported on that. And then prior to their game against Presbyterian, they were all just magically out of the fold. They bring in Tazos Campeteros, who comes over from South Dakota. He was a 40% three-point shooter a season ago at 6'8". This year he's shooting 75% from three. Certainly, I do think that that's going to be calming down a little bit after he had 29 points in the first 2 games of the season, but missing all that they're missing has led to just a little bit of issue down low. I think I said Colin Smith was out of the fold. He's actually been a very good rebounder for this team, but with Lee Dort out, he doesn't necessarily have a lot of help around him. Ezra Magnon, he's able to do a nice job of being able to facilitate, but Vanderbilt has had 30 turnovers in the first 2 games of the season. I do think that things are going to be straightening out a little bit, and Vanderbilt, I would have to think it's at least one of their injured players back. I don't think they get their full allotment of injured players back, but I do think that for Vanderbilt, that home court should be able to help them out quite a bit, but I think that this is going to be a tight nip and tuck game that's going to be a little bit more based around the defense. Vanderbilt has never really been too much of a up-tempo team, so semi-total 136, diving in on the under, and with Greensboro, we'll take 2.5 or more with them. 641, 642 on the betting board. Loyola Chicago is playing us to Illinois Chicago. UIC is an underdog of 10.5 to 11 points, with your total between 142 and 143.5 with UIC. It's not the best 10.5 point underdogs. Now that we're getting 11, I am going to be willing to take the points with the Flames. For Loyola Chicago, I feel like they once again came into the season a little bit overvalued. We saw that in night number 1 against Florida Atlantic. Florida Atlantic was able to beat the brakes off of them. Now with Florida Atlantic, that's just a very good school in general. That just should not have been as underrated as they were coming into the season. But for Loyola Chicago, the question mark is, can they just take care of the ball? 28 turnovers in the first 2 games of the season, and That's a big reason why they had their issues last year. They bring in Patrick Mwamba, who had 6'7", 6'8", was a solid three-point shooter over at Oral Roberts last season, and Greg Dolan, I like his overall game. He was playing over at Cornell 8 seasons ago, where he was able to chip in there 13 points, shot over 40% from three-point range. But gotta have your question marks in terms of so many guys mixing and shaking in the backcourt. You just have not been able to get anything whatsoever ever since Sheldon Edwards came over from Valparaiso. Meanwhile, for UIC, Kobe Okani, he's able to do a nice job with Okani. He's been able to give the team 34 points in the first 2 games of the season at 6'8", shot in the high 30s from three-point range 8 seasons ago. You have a couple of that with a guy whose name is always very, very hard to pronounce, but we're going to try it anyway. Phillips Jaboski, he had 6'7", is able to give you some nice versatility. Is able to do a nice job of banging down low. And I do think that Isaiah Rivera might have been one of the more underrated mid-major transfers in all of college basketball. Last season, shot 38% from 3 with 8.5 points per contest over at Colorado State. 2 seasons ago, shot 44% from 3. That is exactly what UIC needed from distance. And for UIC, his team is under the tutelage of Luke Yaklich. He was really the defensive mastermind among those Michigan teams that were able to have a lot of success. That Michigan team that made the 2018 national title game. So I do think that UIC is going to be able to improve on defense. And Loyola Chicago has always been a team that has had success when they've played defense-oriented. They played a little bit more up-tempo last season, and they have been in general under Mr. Valentine. I think he's realizing that the style that he's trying to implement, it's really not working. I set my total at 138.5, diving in on the under, and at 11 or more, going to take the points with the Flames of UIC. 643, 644 on the betting board. Illinois is going to be playing us at Marquette. Marquette finds themselves as underdogs of 1.5 points. Your total is between 145.5 and 147. I said Marquette is a 2-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them outright on the money line with Marquette. I do think that they're going to lose a battle down low. This is a Marquette bunch that was in the bottom 75 in terms of rebound rate 8 seasons ago, and we got Coleman Hawkins, Mr. Versatile, for this Illinois team move. He was just tremendous last year. 10 points, 6 boards. He's able to pop some threes, give you a block, a steal per contest. But also Ogudero, while he loses the battle down low, I think that he has improved from a season ago where last year he was really the only guy that gave the team north of 5 rebounds per game and still was able to dole out about 3.5 assists, gave you a block and a half per contest. Doesn't pop threes, but does everything else for the team as a little bit of a big man that's able to facilitate. Tyler Kolek has been dealing with a little bit of an injury to begin the season. He's been a little bit limited in the games against Rider and Northern Illinois, but still, I think that he's going to be pretty full go in this one. And even with him not being 100%, he's had 10 assists to 4 turnovers and has been shooting it well from three-point range to begin the season. And I also do think that he's going to be able to get some help in the backcourt from Cam Jones, the top scorer from his season ago. You got David Joplin, who throughout his college basketball career shot just below 40% from three-point range. You got the likes of C.V. Mitchell and company. They're able to help out as well. This is a well-put-together Marquette team going up against an Illinois bunch that certainly has a very dynamic player in TJ Shannon. Dane Danger should be able to do a solid job down low, but are you able to get that outside shooting that you're hoping for out of guys like Luke Good and company? I don't think so, and I think that with Marquette, they are going to be able to generate just enough in terms of steals because that's the way that they're able to play their defense because they do have a little bit of a lack of size down low to be able to get this one done. Did set my total at 146. This is a spot where, with this total right around 147 to 147 after diving in on the under, feels like Illinois wants to play a little bit more defense-oriented this season, but going to be willing to take Marquette outright on the money line, set them as a 2-point favorite. 645, 646 on the betting board. It is Valparaiso. They play us to UW Green Bay. UW Green Bay is an underdog between 5 and 6 points. Your total is 137.5, and with UW Green Bay, set them as underdogs of 6 points. Being able to lay 5 to 5.5 with Valparaiso is something that I'm willing to do, and I think UW Green Bay is going to get better as the season goes along. I like what Sundance Wicks is able to provide for this team, but at the same time, you do have a UW Green Bay team that, as the old saying in Moneyball goes, there's 20 feet of crap and then there's us, and that's where UW Green Bay started to begin the season. Now, they bring in Noah Reynolds, a primary scorer from Wyoming last year. That is a good place to start. Past that, you got a real lack of talent, if I'm just putting it politely. Marcus Hall is a freshman that comes in from the great state of Wisconsin. He's been able to give the team a little bit of rebounding. Foster Wonder was an afterthought over at Southern Illinois last season. Elijah Jones, he's a little bit of a up transfer, was at the non-Division I level. That was been halfway decent thus far this season, but for UW Green Bay, other than what you've got Noah Reynolds, you just don't have much in for Valparaiso. They do lose Ben Krikke, they lose Kobe King from a season ago, but you've got Jerome Palm, who was a good rebounder last year, didn't give the team any sort of scoring whatsoever, but he was able to rebound the ball. Top of that, you've got Jackson Edwards. He comes in from Murray State, where he was a little bit of an afterthought last season, but someone that has been able to see some minutes. You always knew that he had potential, but just never really got an opportunity in general, and he's taking this one, and he is running with it. And then the freshman in Sherman Witherspoon is someone that I do find to be fascinating. He's seen a lot of minutes here in the early goings of the season. Not a great shooter, but I do think that if they can get the ball in his hands in a little bit more of a facilitator's role, he could be able to help out, because they're really relying a lot on Isaiah Stafford, who comes in from the non-Division I level, and so far so good through 2 games, about 6 assists, did 2 turnovers, but I just feel like Valparaiso just a little bit ahead of this UW Green Bay team, and I do think that with Palm being able to dominate down low, that allows Valparaiso to be able to get the job done. I did set my total at a 138. I'm going to be willing to go over, so Nance Wick's looking to play quite a bit more up-tempo with this UW Green Bay team, and Valparaiso, they're not efficient on the defensive end, to say the least, so going to be taking a look at this total over, and with Valparaiso, willing to lay up to 5.5 with them. 647, 648 on the betting board. UT Rio Grande Valley is on the road facing off against TCU. TCU between 26 and 27.5 point favorites. Your total between 159.5 and 161. I did set my total at 155.5 with this UT Rio Grande Valley team. They look to play up-tempo, and they are not very efficient on the defensive side of things. We've found that out against South Dakota a few days ago, but this TCU team, they are pretty good on the defensive side of things. This is a team that certainly has been playing a little bit more up-tempo this season, and really last year as well, with what they were able to get out of their backcourt. They were looking to play a little bit more up-tempo as well, though I do think that this total is set just a little bit too high, because I do think that the TCU defense wins out just a little bit to be able to keep this total below 160. I set my total at a 155.5, and for Grand Valley, they do have guys that, all right, we'll put the ball in the basket. You bring back Dalen Williams from a season ago after he had around 6.5 points, 6.5 boards. He's become a little bit more of a scorer for this team, and I do like the addition of DeAnthony Tipler as well. Guy that a few seasons ago over at ETSU was able to give the team 10.5 points, career about 39.5% three-point shooter, but you do lose really some of your heart and soul pieces from a season ago. You had Justin Johnson be able to log 20-plus points per game. Will Johnson, he was the number 2 scorer, and he was able to log about 14.5 points per game, and those were your 2 double-figure scores from a season ago. So you're really relying upon guys like C.J. Jackson to be able to step up, and I don't know if they're going to be able to provide enough scoring, which is a big reason why as well. I did set TCU as a 27.5 point favorite. TCU on a little bit of flux with regards to the backcourt there, having Avery Anderson, Jameer Nelson Jr. get used to the program, but and these 2 guys through 2 games, they've been able to combine for about 18 assists. Both of these guys have turned the ball over more than what you'd like. TCU, 29 turnovers in the first 2 games, but they do look a little bit improved with regards to their 3-point shooting, which the season ago they were one of the worst teams in terms of 3-point shooting percentage in all of college basketball. You bring in Trey Tennyson, who is a good sharpshooter over at Texas A&M Corpus Christi, and he's made a nice difference. And then they were returning players like Emmanuel Miller, Jacoby Coles, Micah Peavy, these guys that were just nice mixers and shakers for the team last season. They've really been able to step up in tandem with these transfers. So I do think that TCU is going to be able to house a UT Rio Grande Valley team that, again, they're just terrible on defense. I just think that TCU is going to be able to hold up on offense to be able to hold this total under. So it's up my total 155.5, diving in on the under with TCU. Want to lay up to 27 points with them. 649, 650 on the betting board. Colorado State hits the road face-off against Northern Colorado. Northern Colorado is a home underdog between 9.5 to 10 points. Totals between 154 and 155. I did set this line more around a 9.5. I needed at least 10 to take a shot on Northern Colorado. We're now getting those 10, so I'm going to be willing to take 10. And this Colorado State team is one that I do like. Isaiah Stevens, this guy is able to fill it up. 18.5 points and 12 assists per contest to begin the season. Missed a little bit of last season, but when he was out there, the team was completely different. 6.5 assists at 2.2 turnovers per contest a season ago, while shooting 38% from three-point range. He's by far the best player out there on the floor, but I do think that for Northern Colorado, Brock Wisnie is going to be able to do a good job of being able to provide some support down low after a season ago. And the Celtic Connect and really not much else for the team last season. He had about 5 points, 3.5 boards, certainly racked up his fouls, so not afraid to be aggressive, but you also do have a few guys that come to the fold that I do think are going to be able to give this team just a little bit of added production in general. Marcel McCreary, he was a little bit of a sixth man over at Air Force last season that shot in the mid-30s, from three-point range. He's been able to find his footing. Riley Abercrombie, he does not have Fitch along with him, but you know what? This man stands right around 6'9", and for his career, it's been a really good three-point shooter. He's able to shoot pocket about 37% from three-point range. Not a super explosive scorer last year, about 8 points, 4.5 rebounds per game, but a tough matchup for a Colorado State team that has struggled on defense over the last 2 seasons. You've got Niquay Clifford, who comes in from Colorado. He's been able to give the team 6.5 rebounds per game. Patrick Cartier, despite being 6'8", just really doesn't give you a lot of rebounding. He does shoot it well from three-point range, but rebounds are not great. You've got Josiah Strong along Jalen Lake, who are able to give you some nice production in the backcourt, but I do think that with Northern Colorado, a team that brings in a little bit of a Loyola Chicago cast-off in St. Thomas, they've been able to do a nice job of being able to elevate, and just heading to Greeley, Colorado is a tough road trip in general, even for a Colorado State team that is used to going to remote places, being at elevation. So being able to get 10, going to be one to take those points. With Northern Colorado, did somebody total 151.5 as well. Colorado State, even though they have their deficiencies on defense, they're solid on offense, they are not really an up-tempo team. So I'm going to be looking at the under to go along with those points of Northern Colorado. 651, 652 on the betting board. It is Murray State playing us Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky finds themselves as underdogs of anywhere between 3.5 and seeing a stray 3 out there as well. And your total is between 148.5 and 149.5. Made Murray State the 5.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to trust in Steve Prohm, and I am going to be willing to lay these points. For Steve Prohm, he does bring back a lot of the backcourt from the season ago, and that's just so massive because you did see Murray State be out of sorts on the defensive side of things a season ago. I do think that they should be improved with this aspect. They did give up 72 points to Tennessee Tech. That was a little bit rough, but Nick Ellington has been really able to do a nice job down low. Coming over from Eastern Illinois, my expectations for him weren't necessarily too high, but 22 rebounds, 4 blocks in the first 2 games of the season. You're certainly going to be taking that. And then you do have out there in the backcourt Rob Perry, who returns from a season ago after being a double-figure scorer along Jacoby Wood. These guys have been able to combine for about 25.5 points per contest after last season. Perry was a solid but not great three-point shooter. Wood is a little bit more of your facilitator for the squad. He's been able to give out about 4.5 assists per contest, but now he's got as well Brian Moore Jr. to be able to take the load off of him. He was a part-time starter 8 seasons ago that really didn't do a lot of facilitating, but it's looked like a new player this year. He's been able to give out 12 assists in the first 2 games of the season, so I do like the way that Murray State is running the backcourt. And for Western Kentucky, they do bring in pretty much the Texas A&M Corpus Christi regime of Steve Lutz and company, and there's a couple 2-time transfers that have not been able to get out there on the floor, like Jalen Jackson and company, so that has been hurting the team quite a bit. You also lose the 7'5" Jamarian Sharp from the season ago. Brandon Newman has been able to give you about 10 points per contest. Always was a solid shooter over at Purdue. Don McHenry, he has looked relatively solid after he was at Hawaii Hilo a season ago, and at Hawaii Hilo, he was actually a very good double-figure scorer. So a guy that comes over from the non-D1 level, he should be able to elevate a little bit. But Deontay Allen, after he was very good towards the back half of the season last year, he has not been able to give the team too much this season. Christian Lander, it looks like he's starting to find his footing. Another one of those guys that reclassified from a few seasons ago has just never really found it at the college level. So I do think that with this Murray State team, they're just a little bit more put together out there in the backcourt, and they've got a bit more chemistry, which is why I did set them as a 5.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number, and I did set my total at a 143.5. Murray State looking a bit more improved on defense for Western Kentucky. I do think that's going to be a little bit of a work in progress to be able to get up to speed with Steve Lutz's style. So going to be taking a look at the under and willing to lay up to 5 with Murray State. 653, 654 on the betting board. Burr Radley plays host to Tarleton St. Tarleton St, an underdog of 9.5 to 10.5 points, and your total is between 133.5 and 134.5. Bradley got taken to overtime against Utah State a few nights ago, but Utah State, relatively solid school, and this Bradley team has been able to cover north of 75% of their home games since the beginning of the 2022-23 season, and I'm going to trust in them once again. Set Bradley as a 13-point favorite, and this is no knock on Tarleton State. I think that Tarleton State is going to be a relatively solid WAC team, and it's a squad that is very hard to prepare for because they just have that, as I like to call it, psycho zone. It's a little bit more of an amoeba zone that is able to generate a bunch of turnovers, but I do think that they'll have some success being able to turn over Bradley a little bit more than normal. But this Bradley team, very sure-handed with having Duke Dean back after he began his career at Troy. He's done a nice job taking care of the ball for Bradley. 14 turnovers per game in their first 2 games, but do keep in mind one of those games did go to overtime, so they've been averaging a little bit more than 40 minutes per contest, but Malevy Leons, I think, is just too much of a matchup nightmare for the Tarleton State team. Stands right around about 6'9", has been able to give the team a double-double, and is able to shoot in the mid-30s from three-point range. You've also been able to have Colin Hickman be able to give you some nice scoring. Darius Hannah, a season ago, he was able to provide about 5.5 points, 3.5 boards. I do think that he's going to be able to elevate as well as a 6'9", a little bit more of a true post player. And Tarleton St really doesn't have a lot of size. They do have a lot of guys that they're able to do a nice job of being able to generate turnovers. You've got someone like Ja'Cory Smith, who's been able to give the team a combined 9 steals in the first 3 games of the season. But for Tarleton St, they've also turned the ball over about 18 times per contest in their first 3 games as well. And Tarleton St really did have to utilize their game against non-Division I UNT Dallas to be able to jack up those numbers just a little bit. But with this Tarleton St team, they're going to be relying upon Skip to my Lou Williams, who's able to pop some threes, Stephen Barnes, who's able to give you a little bit of facilitation. And Tarleton St, they're deep. They don't necessarily have that primary go-to guy, and I think that they're going to get plowed on the glass. Bradley, a very slow and controlled team at Tarleton St. They generate a lot of turnovers, but they don't necessarily play with a lot of tempo as well. I did set my total at a 133 as a result. Going to be taking a look at the under with Bradley. Made them a 13-point favorite, so going to be one to lay the number. 655, 656 on the betting board. UW Milwaukee, it's the road face-off against Colorado. Colorado, an 18.5-point favorite with your total between 152 and 154. I set Colorado as more around 13.5-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with UW Milwaukee. Milwaukee got a little bit bailed out in that game against Providence. I'm not going to lie. They got completely plowed on glass, but because Providence was not hitting shots that night, they were able to hang in there, and they were able to cover. But I do have my question marks with this Colorado team outside of really their big 2. You've got KJ Simpson and Tristan De Silva return after both of these guys logged 15.9 points per contest. And De Silva at 6'9", pop threes at about a 40% clip a season ago. So that really stood out to me. But with Colorado, what are you going to be able to get out of more of the ancillary pieces? Because like Giovanni Hadley is a relatively solid player that's been able to log 17 rebounds in the first 2 games of the season. You're bringing Eddie Lampkin, who is not necessarily going to be a just amazing offensive player, but on defense, you know that he's going to be able to grab rebounds and he's going to be able to do a solid job as well. And then their star freshman and Cody Williams, he played 28 minutes against Towson and then missed the second game as well. It seems like he's dealing with a little bit of an injury, and that's big because that's like the biggest recruit that Colorado's ever gotten in. He was like a top 25, top 30 guy. So something to be monitoring there. Meanwhile, for UW Milwaukee, you've got B.J. Freeman. And B.J. Freeman, he missed the first game of the season, 33 big points against Providence. And in conference play last year, was logging 18-plus points per contest. He really became that go-to scorer and the heart and soul of this UW Milwaukee team. Now, what you're going to be able to get outside of him, much like I was asking that with Colorado outside their big 2, that's a little bit of a question mark as well. But Kentrell Polian, he was able to be a double-figure scorer last year that shot 39% from three-point range. You had a lot of guys for UW Milwaukee that outside of Freeman, they were all able to give you sort of like 9, 10 points per contest. And I think that we could be seeing a lot of that this season as well. You got Marquise Browning back to fold, who in 54 minutes has provided 3 points, but he's done a good job being able to give you 3.5 assists per game. He's been able to provide a few blocks, a steal. You've got a lot of guys that they just have been able to cater themselves around being able to help B.J. Freeman be able to put the ball in the basket. I think that we're going to see a lot more of that moving forward. Bert Lundy is a guy that knows what the heck he's doing over at UW Milwaukee. Going to elevation is going to take a little bit out of this UW Milwaukee team. A UW Milwaukee team that does play quite a bit more up-tempo. And for Colorado, we saw quite a bit of a tempo change from them last season. Played really fast in the non-conference portion. Once they got in conference, things really slowed down to a crawl. Right now, Colorado looks tremendous on defense, giving up 120 points in their first 2 games of the season. And UW Milwaukee seems to be playing a little bit more slowly this year as well, which is why I did set my total at 151.5 here, up 152 plus. Going to be taking a look at the under at the UW Milwaukee. Going to be willing to take these points with them. 657, 658 on the betting board. Utah State is going to be playing us to Southern Utah. Southern Utah finds themselves as underdogs of between 13 and 14 points. Their total is between 146 and 146.5. Utah State, I said, as a 10.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take double figures with Southern Utah. Pair of teams that they've lost their coach in the offseason. Pair of teams in quite a bit of transition for Utah State. I do think that Danny Sprinkle is going to be able to have some success with the team, but I mean, right now their primary scorer is Grado Saboru. Last season at Montana State, was he a bad player? Oh, heck no. 10 points, 4.5 rebounds per game, but when that's your main scorer, trying to cover this big of a number does feel a little bit out of sorts. Now, Pirsa Falah, one of the first gentlemen of Iranian descent to ever play in college basketball. He was a little bit of an afterthought last year for Southern Utah, one of the main holdovers from a season ago, has really been able to give this team something down low. About 31 points in their first 3 games of the season, averaging about 6.5 rebounds per game, like what I'm seeing there. And the reclamation project for this team is Zion Young. Zion Young began his career at Western Illinois, which is where Rob Jeter was previously. Spent a few years at Oakland, couldn't get out there on the floor, was an afterthought for Southern Utah last season, but if he can regain that form they had during the 2019-20 season where shot 41% from 3 with 13 points per contest, you're staring at something here for the Southern Utah team. A Southern Utah team that has taken care of the ball. They've turned the ball over 22 times in their first 2 games of the season. You'll certainly take that. The team has been able to shoot it quite well from 3-point range. Rob Jeter always is looking to play a little bit more exciting, a little bit more up-tempo. Meanwhile, you've got a Utah State team that I think is going to be dialing it back a little bit. Danny Sprinkle was a little bit more of a defensive coach over at Montana State, but with the moving pieces that you've got with this Utah State team, you've got Darius Brown, who's a very good point guard. 15 assists and 1 turnover in the first 3 games of the season. Having that sort of efficient offensive general, I think is going to bode well for a Utah State team that very nearly went on the road, was almost able to knock off Bradley. I do think that after that tough loss, might be a little bit of a letdown spot. It might be a little bit of a sluggish first half. So I'm going to be willing to take the double figures here with Southern Utah. Set them as 7.5-point underdogs. Set my total at a 150.5. So going to be diving in on the total over as I am seeing between 146 and 146.5 and taking those points with Southern Utah. 659, 660 on the betting board. DePaul plays those to South Dakota. South Dakota, an 8.5-point underdog, and your totals between 151.5 and 152. Seeing a straight 9.5 out there as well, and at that 9 or more, I'm going to be willing to take the points with South Dakota. South Dakota is a pretty deplorable college right now. I'm going to be just calling it what it is, but DePaul also lost their first 2 games of the season on their home floor to Fort Wayne, and they also fell on that game to Long Beach 8, which Long Beach 8 is actually a relatively solid mid-major, but man, this has been a rough start to the season for them, and for South Dakota, you pretty much lose 4 out of your top 6 scores from a season ago from a team that really wasn't that good a season ago as well, so you got a horse apiece situation here. Paul Bruns was a double-figure scorer a season ago over at South Dakota. He figures to be one of the main men for this team going up against a DePaul team that is dealing with quite a few injuries right now. They were expecting to be able to get some production on Make Etienne, a former top 75 recruit. He has yet to be able to take the floor, which means that Jeremiah Odin has been one of their top rebounders. Meanwhile, on the flip side for South Dakota, Lahat Thione, who began his career at Utah along with Central Florida, he's come in and he's been able to give this team a little bit of rebounding. At Central Florida a season ago, Thione was able to give you about 3 rebounds per contest. He's 6'10", so I do think that he's going to be able to hold his own against a DePaul team that, they're very much makeshift with what they've got down low. You got Deshaun Nelson, who has really regressed from a season ago. Season ago in conference play, he was averaging double figures, 11 points in the first 2 games of the season. I was expecting a lot more as well out of Caleb Murphy, who he was just banged up last season. I thought that's a big reason why he just didn't have a lot of production, but he has been not giving the team a whole heck of a lot this season, as well as right now for DePaul. They have been averaging about 17 turnovers per contest against teams that really don't generate a lot of steals. Chico Carter is a relatively good 3-point shooter, but for the South Dakota team, even though they do have a lot of moving parts themselves, I do think that they are going to be able to get a little bit more moving forward out of Caleb Stewart. Caleb Stewart comes over from Louisiana Tech and was able to average about 5.5 points per contest. Wasn't a great 3-point shooter or anything like that, but he's been a nice addition to this backcourt for South Dakota. They themselves turn the ball over quite a bit, shooting a just unreal 46% from 3-point range. That is going to be cooling down a little bit for South Dakota, and I do think that leads to a little bit more of a tame game. I did set my total at 148.5. South Dakota, typically an inefficient defense, but a team that slows things down, and for DePaul, they've been inefficient on both offense and defense, so I'm going to be taking a look at the under, but with South Dakota at 9+, I'm going to be willing to take the points against a banged-up DePaul team to go along with that under. 661, 662 on the betting board. Stanford is playing against Santa Clara. Santa Clara finds themselves as underdogs of between 10 and 11 points. Your total between 158.5 and 159, seeing a 158 flat out there as well. I set my total at 145. Stanford has never been an up-tempo team under Jared Ass, and Santa Clara, they certainly were looking to run and gun it a season ago. With the makeup of this roster, I think that they're going to be playing significantly slower. They've got 3 guys that stand at least 6'10", so they're a little bit more of a clunky team, so I'm going to be taking a look at the under, and I can only set Stanford as a 3-point favorite. I do not understand why they are a double-figure favorite. Jared Ass cannot be trusted. he can't be trusted at all. Maximilian Reynaud has been solid to begin the season. He's been able to log 37 points in the first 2 games of the campaign. You're bringing in Andrei Stojakovic. He has yet to make too much of an impact. I do like some of the pieces that they do bring back. You bring back Michael Jones, who last season was able to shoot in the mid-30s from three-point range at Samford. They looked better on offense towards the back half of the season than they did in the front half. Jared Bynum, he's a good facilitator that comes over from Providence. And if there is one thing Samford has done well, in 2 games they've only had 14 total turnovers. But Santa Clara, I think, should be able to win the battle down low. Samford has size, but they've got guys that are like skittish to grab rebounds. They're more of those finesse big men and things like that. Meanwhile, you bring in 7-footer Francisco Carafero from over at Virginia. Johnny O'Neal is a guy that stands right around 6'11" from American that's able to pop threes. You've also got Christoph Tilley, who's a true 7-footer as well. This in tandem with Carlos Marshall, who's a 6'6" combo player that's able to shoot it well from three-point range. Adama Balla had some good moments over at Arizona, was one of the top international prospects a few seasons ago as well. Jalen Benjamin was a nice facilitator while he was over at Mount St. Mary's, while being able to put in their 16 points, shot 37% from three-point range. I really like this team in general. They've got some good depth as well. Brenton Napper, he missed the first game of the season. He's now back at the fold. That should be able to give this team a little bit of a boost as well. So I do think that Santa Clara going to be able to go 9 or so deep with Stanford. This team is typically more of a slow, methodical team. They were able to put up some big numbers first 2 nights of the season, but I think that Santa Clara and their size going to be really hard for Stanford to contend with, and I think they yearn for a nice slobber knocker of a game against a Stanford team that I feel like they once again came in the season overhyped. So going to be taking a look at the under semi-total at 145, and I'm going to take anything north of 3 with Santa Clara. 663, 664 on the betting board. This is from Chicago. Kansas and Kentucky do battle. Kentucky, an underdog of 5.5 to 6 points. I'm seeing a straight 5 out there as well. Total setting between 146.5 and 148. Opener was 4.5, and I liked the opener, and I'm willing to lay up to 6 with Kansas. Not a half a point more with Kentucky. I'd be a little bit more inclined to take the points if this were March rather than where we're at right now, just because with Kentucky, they've got a whole bunch of freshmen that are looking to find a way to be able to play together, even in their last game against Texas A&M Commerce. You could tell that there were a few hiccups along the way for Kansas. They've looked very good in their first 2 games of the season. I don't read too much into that because they were playing some bum of the month teams, to say the least, in their first 2 games of the season. When you're playing against Manhattan on your home floor and things like that, you should be able to take care of business. And Hunter Dickinson, I do think, is going to be able to wreck some shop in this game. A true 7-footer that's able to pop threes. He's been able to log throughout his career 8+ rebounds per game. You know exactly what you're going to be able to get out of him. But DeJuan Harris, thus far this season, he has had 15 assists and 2 turnovers. He's running things very efficiently for Kansas. If you do have a question mark with this team, it is the depth. Are you going to be able to get anything out of guys like a Parker Braun, who, he comes over after he had Santa Clara, wasn't even necessarily an amazing player. Johnny Furphy, the international gentleman, what are you going to be able to get out of him as a 6'9", little bit of a combo player? And I do have my question marks with Nicholas Timberlake trying to bring Sexy back as well, coming over from Towson. But you have to have all sorts of question marks with Kentucky as well, because they've been dealing with the injury to Aaron Bradshaw. You've been able to have Rob Dillingham do a very good job in the backcourt, but not having Bradshaw out there, not having Ogana Oyasu out there as well. That's 2 big men that they could have used on our good friend and Mr. Hunter Dickinson that are not in the fold. And that means that Trey Mitchell has to do a little bit of everything down low. He's 6'9", he's able to pop some threes, he has a lot of ability. And then got Antonio Reeves and DJ Wagner in tandem in the backcourt, and I like what they're able to provide in terms of facilitation. But this is a little bit of short-handed Kentucky team that I think that they're going to have a tough time down low. Kansas has a few question marks still, even though they're that number 1 team in the country in terms of the rankings. But I do think that they should take it to a Kentucky team that in March, I think that they would have a chance to win this game. Here in November, I think that the chemistry is just not there. Set my total at a 144.5. Diving in on the under, I think that Kentucky might be playing a little bit of a brand of sloppy basketball, and I trust in Bill Self having the screws tightened up on defense. So looking at the under, and with Kansas, 1 to lay up to 6 with them. 665, 666 on the betting board. Long Beach 8 hits the road face-off against San Diego State. San Diego State finds themselves as a favorite of between 13 and seeing a straight 12.5 out there as well. And Total on this game, going to be getting it anywhere between 147 and 147.5. Did set my total at 144. I'm going to be one to dive in on the under. San Diego State actually tried going a little bit more up-tempo in non-conference play last year. It was a big fat flop. They have gone back to playing a little bit more slowly, a little bit more in control, and right now it is working very, very well for them. I don't think that they are going to be messing with Happy, so I'm going to be taking a look at this total under, but with San Diego State could only set them as a 12-point favorite because got a Long Beach State team with the Trayers. They're able to do a really good job as you've got Abdur Trayer along with Lucina Trayer. You've got one that's able to pop some threes, that's able to give you a little bit of facilitating, and then the other gives you a just nice double-double feel in general. These two guys have been very solid. Along with Marcus Siones, guy that doesn't shoot it well from three-point range, but does a good job of running some efficient offense, as a guy that's able to take those mid-range jumpers and is able to sink them. Going up against the San Diego State bunch, that you gotta love what Jaden Ledee is doing down low right now. He's been able to give the team 48 points in the first 2 games of the season, but San Diego State, you can tell that they're in a bit of transition without Matt Bradley, without Nathan Menzel, a lot of those pieces that got the team to the national title a season ago. As a result, we're going to need to see Darren Trammell and Lamont Butler be able to step up. They're combining for about 15.5 points per contest through the first 2 games, and recognize that this is a team that's a little bit more based on defense, but you need a bit more there. You've got Reese Dixon-Waters, who comes in from USC, where a season ago, he was a very solid player, was able to be a number 3, number 4 scorer for them, but you have to be questioning how this backcourt is going to be looking moving forward, and I don't think that it's under the radar as well that you did lose to Arizona, one of your main just defensive pieces in general, as you were able to get about 7.5 points per game out of Keshad Johnson, but he was a big part of that Arizona win as well, so I do feel like it's a San Diego State team and a little bit of transition going up against a Long Beach State team that is brutal with their three-point shooting, but is very good on the glass, and I think that that's going to hold them in this game. Long Beach State, a super up-tempo team, San Diego State, a slow team, because I do think that San Diego State is going to be able to slow things down. I'm going to be willing to dive in on the under, but with that said, I'm also going to be willing to take the points in this one as well, because I do think that Long Beach State holds up on the glass. 667, 668 on the betting board. UMKC is on the road facing off against Baylor. Baylor between 25 and 26 point favorites, and your total is between 142.5 and 144, and with Baylor, I did set them as 21.5 point favorites. I am going to be willing to take these points with UMKC. You got a coach in Marvin Menzies that just does a really good job of making things very, very ugly. He's not necessarily going to be able to get these outright wins or anything like that. He's had his struggles as a coach, but he always gets games that just look like a complete and utter train wreck. I have no idea how, I have no idea why, but that's a Marvin Menzies special, and he's got down low someone in Allen David and Becca Jr., who I really do like. Last season, he was a bit banged up, but when he was out there, 9.5 points, a block, 7.5 rebounds per game. I think that he's going to hold his own against the Baylor squad that's looking to Josh Ojiwana, who's been able to give you about 7.5 to 8 rebounds per game. Baylor once again dealing with injuries to Jonathan Chalmachachua, who's gotten out there on the floor, but a combined 14 minutes this year, so we have to see what we're going to get out of him moving forward. And there's a lot of athleticism on this Baylor team. Yves Messi, he's a true 7-footer and he does a good job down low. He's got some nice athletic ability. Love what you're able to get out of Mr. Langston Love along Jacoby Walter in the backcourt. These guys are combining for about 30 points per contest. Baylor's right now shooting 27.5% from 3. That'll improve. And you've got Ray J. Dennis, who's done a nice job of being able to get the ball in his hands and has really done a nice job of being able to generate some steals as well. But for UMKC, though this team does get a little bit out of sorts with the ball, I do think that bringing in the transfer from Chattanooga and Christian Coruscant is going to be able to help out as well. He's never been a great three-point shooter, but someone that is able to take the load off, is able to be efficient with the ball in terms of not turning it over, getting the ball into hands of guys that are able to score, like an R.T. Stapleton, who he began his career at Radford, went down to the non-Division I level where he was able to have some great success, was able to build up his three-point shooting ability, and I do think that with the UMKC, it's a little bit of a sneaky team that is going to make this game incredibly ugly. I set this line at a 139.5 in terms of my total. I'm going to be looking at the under, and with Baylor, I'm going to make them a 21.5 point favorite. So taking the points with UMKC and the under, 669, 670 on the betting board. Oregon State is going to be playing with Appalachian State. Appalachian State is a 1.5 to a 2.5 point underdog with your total between 134.5 and 135.5. And with Appalachian State, I did set them as an underdog of 2 points. I would rather take 2.5. I'm seeing a 3 out there as well, rather than lay 1.5, because Oregon State at this point can't be trusted that much. I really don't want to be taking Appalachian State outright because they themselves looked a little bit shaky over the weekend, and for Oregon State, they were able to knock off non-Division I Linfield. So yeah, yay, verily there. But for Appalachian State, I do think that they're going to be able to do a nice job down low with Justin Ebsen, who a season ago at 6'9" was able to log a little bit over 2 blocks, 6 rebounds per game. He has been fine. The question mark with Appalachian State always has been and always will be the backcourt. They're shooting 51.5% at the free throw line, which I don't think that this is going to be an amazing free throw shooting team. They should be a little bit better than that. You got a guy in CJ Huntley who's got nice size at about 6'11" a season ago. Actually made about 33% of his threes, 9 points, 6 boards. He's got some good versatility, and Oregon State really doesn't have a lot of versatility. You've got a primary scorer in Jordan Pope that I really like. He's able to bury some threes. When needed, he's able to have the ball in his hands, and they also do have the Georgia transfer in Christian Wright, who looks to be Mr. Wright after he was banged up throughout the year a season ago as well, but got a lot of raw pieces with Oregon State. You don't necessarily have a lot down low. Their main rebounder has been Tyler Bledu, who a season ago was a part-time starter with his Oregon State team, was able to see some minutes towards the back half of the season. And he's got a little bit of versatility with him to be able to match up with CJ Huntley, and I do think that that could be a little bit of a difference, but this Oregon State team, they just appear to be out of sorts with regards to their offense. 30 turnovers in the first 2 games of the season, and one of those games was against Linfield, so that's not too terrific. And for Appalachian State, this team always hangs their hat on defense. Oregon State, ever since the Elite Eight run, they have been very much a defense-oriented team. I think that you're looking at a low-scoring slog and a sad game. I set my total at 126, so diving in on the under end, anything north of 2, going to be willing to take the points with App State. 671, 672 on the betting board. Creighton is going to be playing against Iowa. Iowa finds themselves as underdogs of 10 points, and your total is between 159.5 and 161. I set Creighton as a favorite of 7.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take those points. Now with Iowa, you do want to be cautionary about this team on the road, because when Iowa's been at home, they've been an explosive team. As a matter of fact, since the beginning of the 2022-23 season, Iowa's not failed to score fewer than 75 points at home at all in any game. Iowa, meanwhile, on the road last year, a bottom 30 team in terms of three-point shooting percentage. Their points per 100 possessions last year away from home fell about 21.1 points per 100 possessions, and now they have to go up against Ryan Kalkbrenner. Ryan Kalkbrenner, a true 7-footer that's able to give you blocks. Occasionally it's able to pop threes, and I do like that Creighton now has some depth. That was a big issue that I had with them last year. Last year, they just really didn't go to their bench at all. Now Fran Farabello is getting more minutes. Isaac Trotout, hopefully I said that correctly, from Virginia. He's able to give you a little bit of versatility. Steve Ashworth has done a nice job of being able to run the offense as well. But on the flip side, the Samfords, Peyton Samford being the main of them, is able to do a nice job with this Iowa team as well. He's been averaging a double-double. Now this team is not going to be able to win the battle down low, but Patrick McCaffrey, he's a nice little mixer and shaker. He's able to pop some threes. He's able to give you 5+ rebounds per game. They bring in Ben Krikke as well. Krikke for this Iowa team thus far has been able to give the team right around 12 rebounds, 31 points, first 2 games of the season. Again, Iowa, they had 13 turnovers in their first 2 games of the season, playing against 2 very outmatched teams in Alabama State and North Dakota. Not too many takeaways there for Creighton. North Dakota State and FAMU is who they played. Not a lot of takeaways there, but I do think that Creighton is just the more just overall better team, especially on defense, and I do think that they're going to be able to do an okay job of keeping Iowa in check. Again, I do make quite a bit of something out of those home and road splits for Iowa on offense, but I do think that Iowa is going to be able to do enough to hold in there within single digits. I did set this line more at a 7.5. I am going to be willing to take those points, and with regards to the total, I do think that Iowa just not going to hold up their end of the bargain on the road. Did set my total more around to 155.5 against a Creighton team that does typically a solid job on defense when they are at home. So, going to be taking a look at the under, and I'm going to be willing to take those points. We'll tell you what, this is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra game. 673, 674. USC is playing us to UC Irvine. Zot, the Anteaters, between 13.5 and 14-point underdogs. Totals between 148.5 and 149.5 with USC. I set them as favorites of just 7.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to take the Anteaters. Liked what I saw from them on Saturday night, being able to win that double-figure game against New Mexico State. And for UC Irvine, this team has a very good point guard in Pierre Cockrell that does not turn the ball over a lot. He's actually a halfway decent scorer, but he chooses not to score. He chooses to get guys like Ben Lutken, the 7-footer that's able to pop threes, in the mix. He chooses to just really have his teammates be able to take hold. Devin Tills is someone who, at 6'6", is right now logging 15 points, 7.5 boards. He's able to pop it from 3. Now, the guys on UC Irvine probably not going to be able to match up the best with Isaiah Collier and Boogie Ellis in the backcourt. These two guys are combining for 36 points per contest, a combined 9.5 assists per game out of them, but also a combined 7.5 turnovers per game as well. Now, Joshua Morgan, a nice eraser down low. He should be able to win that battle against Ben Lutken, but you're still dealing with Vincent Iuchukwu currently being out of the fold for this team. DJ Turner up Rodman is able to give you a little bit of versatility as well. And for USC, this is always one of the better teams in terms of 2-point shooting defense. UC Irvine, they do lose some of their guys like Dawson Baker and company that were good 3-point shooters, but this team always does a good job with their interior defense as well. UC Irvine, throughout just the entirety of their pretty much existence, it's always been a little bit more of a slow tempo team. We did see them crank up the offense a little bit more against New Mexico State. I do think that was just more UC Irvine being very efficient in general, as they only took 57 field goal attempts in that one. There was just a plethora of fouls being called, so I do think that had a little bit to play in that total going over, but I do think that USC going to be one of the better defensive teams in all of college basketball as well with what you are able to get on Joshua Morgan. But even though he does a good job of being able to block shots, doesn't necessarily do the world's greatest job of being able to rebound. I think that UC Irvine going to be able to hold up on the glass, and with Cockrell doing a nice job of not turning the ball over, that should allow Irvine to hold in this game. I'm going to be willing to take 11 plus here with Irvine. So my total 138.5. So also diving in on the under. Now let's hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
This starts with 306-501, 306-502. Bucknell is going to be on the road playing against LaSalle. The Bracket Buffs and Bison are between 11 and 12-point underdogs, with your total between 140 and 141. And with Bucknell, I did set them as underdogs of 10 points. I'm going to be willing to take the points. Bucknell coming off of a nice win against Niagara. And for Bucknell, it does feel like they're starting to find their sea legs under John Griffin, who was a legend with Bucknell back when he was playing there back in the day, helped the team in that upset of Kansas in the NCAA tournament way back in the day. And it appears as though Bucknell has found their 7-footer. Noah Williamson, 12.7 boards is what he's logging through 3 games this season. Then you've got Jack Forrest along with Elvin Edmonds, a fourth. Pair of guys are able to knock him down. With Edmonds last year, shot 35% from 3-point range. He's been able to log about 11.5 points per contest. Forrest has good versatility. He's currently shooting 42% from 3-point range. And Bucknell has been able to generate about 8.5 steals per contest as well. It's very clear that this team is looking to play a little bit more in transition. Meanwhile, you've got a LaSalle team that, under Frank Dunphy, they're looking to play a little bit more slow and controlled. And Anwar Gill is a nice glue guy, but you're going to need to have Khalil Brantley along with Jamari Breakus really control this game in the backcourt. A combined 33.5 points per game. These two guys right now, they're shooting about 38.5% from 3. They lose quite a bit down low with not having the Drame brothers, but you got the international man of mystery in Rokas Josias, who comes over from Lithuania, has been able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game. But I do think that Williamson going to be able to hold up there, being able to get double figures with Bucknell. I'm going to be willing to take it. This is a little bit of a battle for the state of Pennsylvania as well, so I do think that Bucknell has a little bit of a chip on their shoulder in that aspect as well. So set my line at 10. Going to be willing to take those double figures with Bucknell. Bucknell, it does feel like it's looking to play a little bit more up-tempo as well under John Griffin, so going to be taking a look at the over. Set my total at 142, 306-503, 306-504. Holy Cross is going to be playing us to Sacred Heart. Sacred Heart is a underdog of a point, and your total is between 143 and 145.5. Said Holy Cross is a 3.5 point favorite. Now, you do have to fear a little bit of a letdown spot after Holy Cross pulls off that big win over Georgetown, but this is a good backcourt, and that Holy Cross win was no fluke. They didn't even shoot it well from 3-point range in that one. You just had Joe Octave take over the game. Joe Octave and Bo Montgomery right now are averaging 35 points per game. They brought in Dave Paulson in the offseason, and we all recall what he was able to do in this conference over at Bucknell. Led them to some NCAA tournament appearances. Really had that team humming and firing on all cylinders. Holy Cross shooting 37.5% from 3. They do have a little bit of a weakness. They really don't have a lot of size down low. Jarrell Gates now being out of the full, but you do have Luth M. Koulibaly, who I think is going to be able to improve as the season goes along. Was limited to just 2 games last season, and that's where Sacred Heart is going to need to try to win this game, because you've got Nico Galletti, who was able to log double-figure amount of points, about 8.5 rebounds per game, and then you've got Tanner Thomas, who was a little bit of an afterthought last year for Sacred Heart. Nice off-the-bench player that was able to give the team 7 points, 4.5 rebounds per contest. Able to pop threes, but not great. But at 6'6", he's really been getting his nose dirty, doing a nice job grabbing some rebounds. Then the Metro Atlanta transfer guards, Aiden Carpenter along with Raheem Solomon, they've both been able to give you about 10 points per contest. They're good, but not great three-point shooters, and you have to question what you're going to be able to get out of Kyle McGee as well, an up transfer that comes in from the non-Division I level. He's been a nice stat sheet stuffer at 6'4", 5 assists, 5.5 rebounds, 6.5 points per contest. Passive, but very good at just knowing his role for the team. But I do think that with Holy Cross, having that well put together backcourt, having a lot of chemistry with this team, having a lot of guys buy in despite the fact that you did see a little bit of a coaching change, I am going to be, as a result, willing to take Holy Cross in the spot, set them as a 3.5 point favorite, and did set my total at a 143.5. Dave Paulson's teams typically do play some solid defense at a little bit more of a mid-tempo style, and they're going to look to hang their hat with regards to rebounding in this one. So going to be taking a look at the under and willing to lay it with Holy Cross. 306-505, 306-506. Rhode Island is playing as a Wagner. Wagner is an underdog of between 8.5 to 10 points, and your total between 135.5 and 136.5. And with Wagner, set them as just 6-point underdogs. I do like what I've seen early on from this Rhode Island team, but at the same time, I do think that things might be tapering off just a little bit with a team that has been playing quite a bit more up-tempo style and has been able to get quite a few points on the board. But that said, I do take a look at this spot, and with Wagner, they just take you to the dentist. I mean, this Wagner team, they make things so unfun and they make things so grimy, it's not even funny. Even with Bashir Mason out of the fold, they have maintained this slow grinder style, and I do think that they're going to have some success with the guys that they have brought in. You've got Raheem Moore, who's one of the main holdovers from a season ago. A season ago, he was a starter that was able to give the team right around 8.5 points. He was someone that was able to shoot about 29% from three, and that is not the hallmark of Wagner. Wagner, one of the worst three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball last season, but you bring back someone that's able to do a nice job of just providing a little bit of everything, like Javier Esquera, who last season was able to give the team like 7 points, 3 boards, 3 assists, a steal per contest. I mean, these are really good glue guys, and now they bring in the councilman, Melvin Council Jr., who at the non-D1 level was really able to flourish. He's been able to give the team 34 points in the first 2 games of the season. He's really been able to give them a little bit of elevation, and then for Rhode Island, they're always right with Always Right, who's been able to give you 12 assists in the first 2 games of the season. His name is actually Always Right. I'm not kidding when I say that, but for Rhode Island, you've also been able to get really good production out of Jaden House, who was a nice player over there in the Big South for many, many years. At High Point last year, he was not a low point, 17 points, 4 assists, didn't shoot it well from three-point range, but is able to help you space the floor a little bit more, and then you've been able to get some nice production as well out of Zeke Montgomery, which I'm wondering why you transfer from Bradley, because he was starter over there, but he's been able to do a nice job helping out in the backcourt as well. You do have to wonder how the team is going to be able to do down low. Lewis Coatwright, he comes in from Quinnipiac. He's been able to give this Rhode Island team quite a bit of guard play as well, and Rhode Island, it looks like it's very clear. They're going to be looking to play some positionless basketball. Wagner, I think, is going to try to pound this team down low, and I do think that they're going to have some success on the glass, making this slow, yucky, cutting off the three-point arc. Set my total at 132. I'm going to be looking at the under. Rhode Island can only make them a 6-point favorite, so take the points with Wagner and the under. 306-507, 306-508. Penn State is going to be playing as the St. Francis of PA. St. Francis between 24.5 and 25.5 point underdogs. Totals between 139 and 139.5. And with Penn State, I did set them as favorites of 24.5 points. Now being able to get 25.5, I'm going to be willing to take these points with St. Francis of Pennsylvania. Certainly it's an uphill battle for St. Francis of Pennsylvania. They pretty much lose all their top 5 scorers from a season ago, including the main man in Josh Cohen, but they've been able to have Cameron Gregory do a solid job with his team. He's been able to shoot in the mid-30s from three-point range. Last year at about 5 points per contest and 2.5 assists. They knew that they were going to need to have him in a little bit of a bigger role, and so thus far, so good. Now, for the St. Francis team, they don't have a single guy that's averaging more than 3.3 rebounds per game, and that is an issue. Now, the good news is, for Penn State, they don't necessarily have a boatload of size, so they do have Qudus Wahab, one guy that is currently averaging 15.5 rebounds per game, and he is going to completely decimate St. Francis of Pennsylvania down low. With this Penn State team, though, they are in a bit of transition, and they are getting very sloppy with the ball. A combined 36 turnovers in the first 2 games of the season. Now, that's just the Mike Rhodes style. He comes over from VCU. He brought with him Ace Baldwin. He brought with him a few other guys like Nick Kern and company, and He also brought in a few guys from the Temple Owls as well, like Zach Hicks is in the fold for this team. You're bringing in North Carolina's DeMarco Dunn as well. So, there are a lot of moving parts with this team, which is why I do think that St. Francis might be able to hold in there a little bit, even though they really don't have a lot of size down low. I do think that Cam Gregory is going to be able to take care of the ball a little bit against a swarming team in Penn State that has a guy in Ace Ball, one that's able to give you multiple steals per game. 2 seasons ago, was able to shoot north of 40% from three-point range. Penn State should be able to win this game, and I think that they win this game by quite a bit. I do think that this is just a little bit too big of a spread, though. Getting 25 plus, I'm going to be willing to take those points. I did set my total at a 138.5. I think that St. Francis is going to struggle to score, and I do think the Penn State really going to be able to do a good job of holding St. Francis to one-and-done opportunity. So we're going to have the under, and we'll take north of 25 here with St. Francis. We go to 306, 509, 306, 510. UConn plays us in Mississippi Valley State. The Delta Devils are between 42.5 and 43-point underdogs. Your total's between 145.5 and 146.5. I set my line at 42. Here, now that we're getting north of 42, I'm going to be willing to take the points, which it's a grody take. It's a really, really grody take. I do think that UConn in about the final 5 minutes of the game are going to be having Walkie McWalk-On out there, and Walkie McWalk-On might actually be better than what you're able to get out of Mississippi Valley State, if I'm being completely honest. This is just bad, but that said, I think UConn might be merciful to our good friends in Mississippi Valley State, who they do have one guy that I actually do like. You've got Raekwon Brown, who's averaging 15.5 points, 5 boards last year. Didn't shoot a great from 3, but you know what? He's able to give you a little bit over a steal per contest. This team is going to get decimated on low. Donovan Clingan, he can play 15 minutes and probably get a double-double. You got Alex Caravan, who he's at right around about 6'8", really able to pop it from 3 at 40%. He's been able to give the team 37 points in the first 2 games of the season, but saw Stonehill very nearly be able to pull off the cover, except for UConn's backups were better than Stonehill's backups, and I do think that's going to come down to that. I think that UConn might have a couple dead ball violations that allows Mississippi Valley State to be able to cover this number. I do think that there's going to be a lot of experimentation. They brought in Cam Spencer in the offseason, who was very awesome out in the Big Ten 8 seasons ago over at Rutgers, being able to dole out the ball. He was very efficient in terms of not turning it over, as well as Stephon Castle has been a 6'6" combo player that has been tremendous as a freshman. But I do think that for UConn, because they're going to be experimenting and tinkering with other lineups, because it's got what it is, they're going to win this game very, very easily. That allowed Mississippi Valley State to hang within 42. I set my total at a 144. I think Mississippi Valley State is going to come up a little bit short in terms of being able to do their part on this total, but with UConn, I do think that they show a little bit of mercy towards the end of this game to allow for a cover. So I'm going to be taking a look at the under, and anything north of 42, I am willing to take the points with Mississippi Valley State. 306-511, 306-512. Florida is going to be playing us to Florida A&M. A&M is an underdog of 27.5 to 29 points. Their total is between 146 and 147. I made Florida the 31-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. I'm going to call it what it is. Florida A&M, a bottom 10 team at minimum in all of college basketball. Might be a bottom 5 team in all of college basketball. This is just not a team that I want to be taking a shot with. And for Florida, I recognize that they're trying to figure some things out, but they were close but no cigar against Virginia. Riley Kugel, after he had a nice back half of the season last year, where in the final 10 games he was averaging 14-plus points per contest, he has piggybacked off of that, being able to log 40 points in the first 2 games of the season this year. Micah Handglon is going to be able to completely decimate whatever Florida A&M tries to throw at him down low. You've got someone in Chase Bars who's been able to give you 8 rebounds in 2 games for Florida A&M, but Florida A&M has no shooting to speak of. They're right now shooting 18.5% from 3-point range, and it's going to improve a little bit, but Florida A&M out of 363 D1 teams last year, they were 363rd in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis. As a low-tempo team, they were turning the ball over 60 times per contest last season. They've done a better job of being able to improve that just a little bit, but who are you going to be looking to in the backcourt? You're probably looking at Jordan Chapman, who last season as a part-time starter at about 5.5 points per contest, but he shot 19% from 3-point range. It's brutal. to say the least. While Florida, you've got Walter Clayton, who's able to shoot 40% from three-point range. You've got someone like Tree Samuel is able to do a nice job down low as well, along with Anglotton. Even someone like a Justice Rishwain, if he gets into the game, he's much better than anything that Florida A&M is able to throw at them. I think that this should be just a massacre. I set Florida as a 31-point favorite, and I do think that Florida could be relatively solid on defense, but again, Florida A&M dead last in the country last year in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and they were actually an average team with their defense. They actually weren't horrible on defense. They're absolutely deplorable when it comes to their offense, though. So did have to set this total at a 141. Going to be looking at the under and willing to lay it with Florida. 306-513, 306-514. Syracuse is playing against Colgate. Colgate, not the toothpaste, is a 5 to 5.5 point underdog, and your total between 157.5 and 158.5. For me to look at a minty fresh cover with Colgate, I would need to be getting more like 7 points. I did set my line at a 6.5. Syracuse has actually lost, I believe, in back-to-back years to Colgate, but this Colgate team is a little bit down from what we've seen in past years. They should have Braden Smith, no, not the one from Purdue, being able to step in and being able to do a solid job, as he a season ago was a very versatile player, being able to shoot 36% from 3, 11.5 points, 4 boards, 4.5 assists, and has been able to give the team about 17 points in that win over Brown. And you did see Colgate play a little bit more slowly in that game. Now Brown, a very much defense-oriented team, and now they go up against Syracuse team with, I think, 2 really good guards, Judah Mintz, J.J. Starlin. Starlin's not a great three-point shooter, but he's able to throw out the ball. He's able to use his versatility to be able to get guys open, and Judah Mintz is able to be a little bit more of a knockdown scorer. A season ago, Mr. Mintz only shot about 30% from 3, but was good at being able to get to the free throw line. 4.5 assists. His shot just looks very much improved this season. On top of that, down low, you got someone in Malik Brown, who I think is going to be able to do a solid job matching up with the likes of Keegan Records, Sam Thompson. You've got a Colgate team that, unlike the past years, they don't have as much good three-point shooting. The last 2 seasons, Colgate has been in the top 5. Actually, the last 3 seasons, they've been in the top 5 in terms of three-point shooting percentage. I think that run is probably going to be coming to an end. They did lose a lot of their good scores from last season, but they returned a lot of that low post play. Even someone like a Ryan Moffitt, he did shoot 45% from 3 last season. Not necessarily on the world's highest volume at 6'7", though, so I do think that he's going to be having the ball in his hands a little bit more, and I do think that with the old Autry style of Syracuse, actually bringing guys in off the bench, a novel concept, that is going to allow Syracuse to be able to win out in the backcourt. I think they hold their own on the glass, and that allows Syracuse to be able to snap this kid that they've got against the old Colgate Raiders. I set Syracuse as a 6.5 point favorite, willing to lay up to 6 with them. Did set my total at 154.5. Colgate still going to be an efficient offense. I don't think they drain as many threes as they have the last few seasons, though. So going to be diving down on the under and going to be willing to lay the points with Syracuse. 306-515, 306-516. Ole Bellarmine is going to be on the road facing off against Chattanooga. The Mocs between 6.5 and 7 point favorites. Totals between 147.5 and 149. I said Chattanooga is a 10 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the points with the Chattanooga bunch. They are so well coached under Dan Earl. He came over from VMI. It was a little bit rough going last season because their 7-footer Jackson Stevens got hurt, but that did give this team just a feel of how it's going to be without him this year, and so far so good, as they were able to go on the road and they were able to knock off Louisville, which honestly, that sounds like a much better win than what it is. Louisville just stinks this season, but for Bellarmine, they've got guys like Bash Weiland back in the fold who's able to give you 15.5 points per game, but since coming up to the D1 level, Bellarmine's been a bottom 50 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, just a unique team in general. Bellarmine plays super duper slow, their defense stinks, but they're pretty efficient on offense. Right now they're sinking about 35.5% from 3, but the turnovers, it's really taking hold for Bellarmine. They're a slow tempo team that has been turning the ball over 17 times per game. That is not great. Meanwhile, Hunter Huff, who was ineligible last year for just tomfoolery in general, bad rules. He's now back out there after he began his career playing for Mr. Earl at VMI. He has been tremendous this year, being able to score 34 points in the first 2 games. He, under Earl 2 seasons ago, was able to shoot about 37.5% from 3. He's going to be a nice role player for this offense. Down low, you've been able to get a lot of rebounding as well out of Sam Alexis. Alexis has been giving you 12 rebounds per contest last year. He was able to provide 4 boards and is someone that at 6'9" is able to pop some threes. That's something that Bellarmine is going to have its issues with. You've got a Bellarmine team that just really doesn't have ideal size. You've got someone like Peter Suter who's able to do a good job of being able to dole it out, but Bellarmine's turning the ball over a lot. Good news for them is that Chattanooga is not a team that's going to be forcing a lot of turnovers, but Chattanooga, they're going to dice you up from three. In terms of percentage of shots that came from three last year, Chattanooga was number one in all of college basketball. I think with Bellarmine's sloppiness, it's really going to prevent an over in this spot. It just feels like they're not controlling things in the backcourt the way that they have in past years. So I did set my total more around a 142. I'm going to be diving in on the under. And with Chattanooga, set them as a 10-point favorite. So going to be willing to lay the points with Chattanooga and taking a look at this total under 306-517, 306-518. Jacksonville is going to be playing us to Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern finds themselves as underdogs of 4 points in your total. That's anywhere between 130 and 130.5. With Georgia Southern, I set them as 3.5 point underdogs. Being able to get 4, I can't take anything less than 4 with Georgia Southern, but I'm willing to take 4. As with Georgia Southern, I do think that they're going to be able to do a relatively solid job in terms of just providing size against a Jacksonville team that under the tutelage of Minzy, they have been playing very, very slowly. They have been really trying to grind things out down low, and you've got Carlos Curry, who's able to do a very solid job down low. It hasn't really shown that this year. This season, he has played in 2 games, and he has only provided about 5 rebounds in those games. Last year, about 7 points, 7 boards. I think that he's going to be able to get back to full force. As for Georgia Southern, they've really been featuring a lot of Russell Dean, who was the go-to guy over at Hampton a season ago. He, in his first game as a member of Georgia Southern, was able to provide 20 points, but on top of that, you've got Cam Bryant, who stands right around 6'8". He's able to do a relatively solid job in the post, and then you bring in Jamar Franklin as well, a big part of what South Alabama was able to do a season ago. Shot about 35.5% from 3 with about 5 points per contest. Meanwhile, you've got a Jacksonville team that brings in Robert McCray the fifth, and he has been a well-traveled gentleman who began his career at Wake Forest. He went down to the non-D1 level, and so far he's been able to provide some nice scoring for the team. On top of that, down low, you once again have the Payne train, as you've been able to get some really good rebounding. You've been able to get some nice versatility in general out of Stephon Payne III. Gasai Powell at 6'3" is able to pop some threes as well. But this is a team that's in a little bit of transition that they could really use Jarius Cook to get back to what he was at North Dakota State a few seasons ago. 2 seasons ago, he was able to log about 8.5 points per contest, shot darn near 40% from 3. Last year, he had a turn of a season, providing 5.5 points per game. Wasn't really able to make too much of an impact with this offense. And for Jacksonville, it just feels like it is a little bit of a rudderless ship at this point. For Georgia Southern, they're in a lot of transition without Andrei Seversov, and Curry, it just feels like he's not necessarily at 100%, but even with that, I think that this is going to be a slow grinder of a game. I did set my total at 127.5, diving in on the under, and with Jacksonville, going to make them 3.5 point favorites. So take the plays with Georgia Southern and the under, 306-519, 306-520. Tennessee Tech is going to be playing us at Lipscomb. Lipscomb is a 2.5 to a 3 point favorite. Your total is between 145.5 and 146.5 for Lipscomb. I set them as a 4 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number with Lipscomb. They've been with Jacob Onyesevich being out of the full, but even with them out, they played very hard against Drake. They very nearly blew that cover, by the way, and good grief, anyone that took that one, you were sweating that out. But that said, for this Lipscomb team, they are trying to transition without Hassan Asadullah, who is a 6'9", 6'10", a little bit of a point forward, but Will Pruitt is a little bit of a do-it-all player as well. At 6'3", he's able to give you about 5 points, 4 boards thus far this season. You go back to what he did last year, it was more like 10 points, 5 boards, 3 assists, shot 40% from 3-point range. He's had a little bit of a rough start to the season. I think he's going to be able to pick it up. Coupled with that, you've got Joe Anderson, who began his career at Furman and was always a relatively okay, just a little bit of a gadget guy over at Furman, a career 40% 3-point shooter, just was stuck behind a lot of talent in general, and he's going up against a Tennessee Tech team that they really don't have a main point guard as of right now. You've got Javius Harvey, who's been able to give you about 13 points per contest. That has been solid, but they lose a lot of their top flight rebounding from last season, and Tennessee Tech really did a nice job of going bombs away from 3 last year. Guys like Jalen Sabri, Bryce Thompson, they were good 3-point shooters. You also lose from a season ago, guy that I liked in Ty Perry, so having to replace pretty much 4 out of your top 6 scorers from a season ago, very difficult for a Tennessee Tech team that to start with didn't really have a lot of rebounding. It's a band of misfit pieces that brings in David Craig, someone who stands 7'2", began his career at Mercer. At Mercer last year, he was able to get about 4 boards per contest. They just haven't played him too much, and I'm not sure why. Maybe there's something injury related. Maybe he's not picking up the system, but he has not been out there to say the least, and that has led to Tennessee Tech having to really rely upon the backcourt. Ronnie Johnson Jr. has had to play a lot of significant minutes as well, so this is a spot where I do think the Lipscomb is going to be able to roll despite the fact that they have to deal with the injury to Onyesovic, so I'm going to be willing to lay up to 3.5 with Lipscomb. Also did set my total at a 144. Tennessee Tech just not the same team at being able to go bounce away from 3 that they were a season ago, so diving in on the under and diving in on Lipscomb. 306-521, 306-522. New Hampshire plays us to Brown. What can Brown do for you? Well, if they win by more than 4 points, they'll make you money. They are a 4-point favorite, and your total between 140.5 and 144. With Brown, I set them as 3.5-point favorites. Being able to get 4 or more, I'm going to be willing to take a shot on New Hampshire. With New Hampshire, they are outgunned overall, but they do have the best player, in my opinion, out there on the floor, and that'd be Clarence O'Daniel, who was able to average a double-double last season. This guy is able to stuff the stat sheet. He's able to shoot in the mid-30s from 3-point range. Clarence Daniels, he is that guy. Now, Nana Owusu Anane is going to be able to control things down low. It's right now averaging a double-double for this Brown team. Last year, he was able to give you a block, a steal per contest. Trying to shoot threes didn't necessarily do so very well, but that's why you've got Keno Lilly, who out there in the backcourt last season for Brown was able to log 17 points, shot 40% from threes, able to dole out the ball a little bit as well. But for this New Hampshire team, they have brought in a nice couple pieces to be able to help out in the backcourt as well. You've got Ahmad Robinson, who comes in from the non-D1 level. He's been able to do a nice job with about 12.5 points, 6 rebounds per contest, and then you take a look at what you're able to get out of this Brown team. It is a lot of inconsistent three-point shooting because now you've got Paxton Wojcik out of the fold, though Brown, they do an incredible job of being able to play defense, but you also take a look at this New Hampshire team. Their identity is play super-duper slow, make the game a little bit yucky, and take care of the ball. New Hampshire was one of the best teams in all of college basketball last year in terms of fewest turnovers on a per-possession basis. I think that this is going to be a slow, controlled game. I think that this is a total that's being set a little bit too high. New Hampshire is able to play some good offense without fouling. So this is a spot where I did set my number at a 133.5 with regards to the total. I'm going to be taking a look at the under. North Brown made them 3.5-point favorites. So at 4 or more, taking the points with New Hampshire to go along with this total under. 306-523, 306-524. Queens NC is playing us the High Point. High Point looks to not be a low point as they're between a 3.5 to a 4-point underdog. Your total between 164.5 and 166. And I set my total at a 157. We saw a high-scoring affair when these two teams took the floor last season. I think that we've went a little bit too far. I'm going to be diving in on the under, but I did also make Queens NC a 5-point favorite, so going to be one to lay the 3.5 to 4 with High Point. You saw this team be incredibly inconsistent last season. You bring back Abdoulaye Thiam, who was last season able to log about 15 or so points per contest, and now you're bringing Denzel Hines, who, as a 6'7" freshman, has actually looked really good. Coming in off the bench, he has been able to log 18 rebounds in the first 2 games of the season, but for Queens, even though they're dealing with right now that injury to Gavin Raines, they still do have, in my opinion, just a little bit more down low, and you've got good versatility in general with someone like a BJ McLaurin, who had 9.5 points, 5.5 boards, shot about 39.5% from 3-point range last season. AJ McKee last season, he was able to dole out about 2 assists, 4.5 boards, 15 points. He shot 39% from 3-point range. Queens is just, in general, able to knock down these outside shots. You would like to see a little bit more out of Caleb Matthews. After he was a starter last season, he's been slow to get going thus far this season, but he should be able to provide something in that backcourt as well. And then you've got on the flip side a High Point team that really does lack a lot of size. They really do lack a lot of just chemistry in general in that backcourt. Other than Abdoulaye Thiam, it's completely a new look bunch. Duke Miles, someone I really do like. He comes in from Troy. Last few seasons has just been ravaged by injury after during the 2020-21 season was doling out about 3.5 assists per contest. But in this new look, I do think that he's going to be struggling just a little bit. And with Queens, I do think that they get it done with their 3-point shooting against a High Point team that's been one of the worst in terms of being able to guard the arc last few seasons. I did set my total at 157. High Point, I think, is going to be dialing it back just a little bit to avoid massive turnover woes. And with this Queens team, I do think that they get it done on the glass. So looking at the under and looking to lay it with Queens. 306-525, 306-526. St. Joe's hopes to not be average Joe's. They play us to Stone Hill. Stone Hill is a underdog of between 18 and 19.5 points. Your totals between 140 and 142 with St. Joe's set them at 16.5-point favorites. So we'll take the 18 to 19.5 that I'm seeing with Stone Hill. Stone Hill has back Max Zagorowski, who at 6'8" is able to give you about 5 boards. He's able to shoot it well from 3-point range, and I do think that that's going to take a little bit out of a St. Joe's team that they've got a bit more depth than a season ago. Last year, you can tell that they had their great starting 5, and then you really didn't have a lot after that. So have Eric Reynolds being able to put in there about 15 or so points per game. Kapper Klancic, he was really solid last year down low with about 5.5 boards, 7.5 points, a block, a steal per contest, a little bit of a do-it-all player, but that's it for the St. Joe's team. What are you going to be able to get in terms of the 7-footers that come in, and Charles Coleman along Chris Adesodoko? These two guys are a little bit of question marks. You still have Lynn Greer doing a nice job of being able to dole out the ball, as in the first 2 games, he has had 15 assists at 2 turnovers against Penn and Lafayette. So that is what you do like to see for St. Joe's. But Stone Hill, even though they're not a team that they do a great job of being able to generate turnovers or anything like that, they themselves are a team that's able to go bombs away from 3-point range. You've been able to get some good scoring early on from Jackson Biagini. Biagini last season, he was over at the non-D1 level. He has resurfaced, and he has been able to shoot about 40% from 3-point range. I think that you're going to get a little bit more moving forward out of Sifion Triplett. He's a true freshman that comes in from the Massachusetts area. He's been able to do a relatively solid job for the team as well. Pano Paladivas gives the team a little bit of size after he was served for Hartford down low as well. So I do think that St. Joe's going to be able to get it done. What you're able to get out of the stepped pieces is the question, though, and I do think that that's going to keep Stone Hill lively in this game. I did set my total 142.5. St. Joe's, a little bit more of a mid-tempo team, but they have been quite efficient on the offensive side of things, so I'm going to be taking a look at this total over, and I'm going to take the points with Stone Hill. 306-527, 306-528. You've got UMass Lowell on the road facing off against Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech is a favorite of between 4 and 4.5 points. Your total is between 147.5 and 149. I say UMass Lowell as a favorite of 2 points, so I'm going to be taking UMass Lowell outright on the money line. Absolutely love the size they've got down low for this UMass Lowell team, as you bring back Abdul Kulabali. He's able to do a really nice job of giving you like 9 rebounds per game. On top of that, you've got an all-AEC defensive player from a season ago in Max Brooks as well that's able to give you blocks. You bring in Anthony Blunt, who should be able to elevate this backcourt just a little bit as well after he last season, a little bit of an afterthought that shot about 35% from 3-point range. But on top of that, you got someone in Ayinde Akeem who's able to give you a few assists, is able to dole out the ball, get guys like Yuri Covington, they're able to shoot it well from 3 in space. And UMass Lowell last year was a top 65 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, going up against a Georgia Tech team that I think has a lot of nice raw pieces. Miles Kelly from the Georgia Tech team from a season ago held in there, even though Damon Stoudemire is now the new head coach. He's been able to give the team 52 points in the first 2 games of the season and really bailed them out in that Howard game. Overall, for Georgia Tech, only 10 turnovers, shooting 36% for 3-point range, but also shooting 61% the free throw line. That could be a difference maker in this game. You've got Kyle Sturvant. He's someone that last season shot in the mid-30s from 3-point range, doled out about 3.5 assists, 8.5 points per contest. He should help out Kelly in the backcourt. And then you also do have Kawasi Reeves, who comes over from Florida. I like his overall game as well. But Quentin Mincy has been able to do a very nice job of being just all sorts of versatile for the UMass Lowell team. Comes in after a season ago. He was a little bit more glued to the bench after he was a bit more of a scorer 2 seasons ago. But, I mean, he's a career 40% 3-point shooter that's now able to grab some boards. This UMass Lowell team is just a very good defensive team. They do look to play a little bit more up-tempo, but they just really do hold up on the defensive side of things as well. And I do think that Georgia Tech going to be dialing back their tempo a little bit as well. So I did set my total at a 142, diving in on the under at the UMass Lowell. Going to be taking them outright on the money line. I did make them the favorite of 2 points. 306-529, 306-530. Howard is going to be playing us Boston U. Boston U, an underdog of between 9 to 10.5 points. And your total is between 148.5 and 150. And with Howard, I did set them as a favorite of 9 points. So being able to get north of 9.5, I'm going to be willing to take those points with Boston U. Boston U, very much a makeshift new team. They lose pretty much each other top 5 scorers from a season ago. That does leave them in rough straits, and they lose a lot of the facilitation that they had from a season ago. So they have been really looking to Matai Baptiste, a true freshman that comes in from the country of Canada, has been solid, shooting about 37.5% from 3. He's been able to generate 6 steals in the first 2 games of the season. So, like what he's able to bring to the table, yeah, it's going to be tough to be able to match up with someone like Bryce Harris, who thus far this season has been pretty darn solid for Howard, as he's been able to do a nice job being able to log right in the neighborhood of about 18.5 points per contest. Shai Odom has been able to do a solid job as well of being able to grab 6 boards, give you 13 points, and that's going to be a little bit of an issue for a Boston U team that, I mean, just in general, ever since you lost a few guys from that 2021-22 season at Sukmail Mathan and company, that they do need to get a little bit more size in general, but I do think that having Miles Brewster in the fold is going to be able to help out as well. He last season a mid-30s three-point shooter that was able to give you a steal, a few assists per game. I do think that he's going to be able to do a nice job in the backcourt going up against a Howard team that they play super up-tempo, and as a result, they oftentimes do get very sloppy. 18 turnovers per game. A lot of the issues that Howard have are self-inflicted wounds. You've got a lot of good talent on this team. Jordan Harrison is someone that comes in after he spent the last few seasons at Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, and UNC Asheville. I still remember at Corpus Christi as a true freshman, shot 44% from 3, 13 points per game. But you also have yet to see the man of mystery and Seth Towns back for about his 500th year of college basketball as well. And for Boston U, I do think that their backcourt is going to be able to help them hold in this game. And Howard, I just think that they're going to cost themselves a cover because they just commit way too many turnovers. Got a Boston U team that plays super duper slow. They're looking to hang their hat a little bit more on defense, and I do think that that's going to win out a little bit more in this matchup. So I did set Boston U as a 9-point underdog. Won't take 9.5 or more, and with this total, I set mine at a 145, so diving under. 306-531, 306-532. North Alabama hits the road face-off against Mississippi State. Mississippi State finds themselves as 18.5 to 19-point favorites. Your totals between 140 and 142, and with Mississippi State, set them as 23.5 point favorites. Going to be willing to lay this number. North Alabama, they do lose quite a few of the good scores that they have from a season ago, including Daniel Ortiz, who shot it at way north of 40% from 3-point range. And for Mississippi State, last year the team was in the top 10 in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're once again performing very well on defense, giving up less than 60 points per contest, granted, against UT Martin and Arizona State. But Trey Ford, who is one of the best junior college transfers in all of college basketball, he has given this team a 3-point shooting pop that they just haven't had in past years. Shooting north of 50% from 3 along Josh Hubbard. We should see that tail off a little bit, but Mississippi State last year, 363rd out of 363 D1 teams in terms of 3-point shooting percentage. And Andrew Taylor, who averaged 20 points per game at Marshall, he hasn't even done anything yet. This team is still dealing with the ailment that they've got to Tolu Smith, their top scorer from the season ago, but Jimmy Bell has been able to hold it down low with 21 rebounds in the first 2 games. Cameron Matthews has done a nice job in the post as well. This team is doing a nice job of not turning the ball over, and got a North Alabama team that they really don't provide a lot of resistance on defense. They do have a guy in KJ Johnson that does a nice job of not turning the ball over himself, but he doesn't have too many guys to be able to help him out. You got to be looking to someone like Jakari Lane, who last season he was able to provide 12.5 points, shot in the mid-30s from 3-point range. Will Sosi was a very good 3-point shooter for the team season ago. He has shot 100% from 3, but he hasn't been able to find a lot of open looks in general with North Alabama. Other than Demaine Forrest, you just don't have a lot of guys to be able to keep down low at bay with a Mississippi State team that's one of the best in all of college basketball in terms of being able to rebound. Did set my total 137.5. Mississippi State, I think, is just going to be able to continue to pound teams into oblivion. They should see a little bit of regression with their 3-point shooting, but I think that they just absolutely take it to North Alabama. I'm going to be taking a look at the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 23 with Mississippi State. 306-533, 306-534. Alcorn State is on the road facing off against Arkansas State. Arkansas State between 7.5 and 9-point underdogs. Your totals between 149.5 and 150, and with Arkansas State, did set them as favorites of 8 points, so going to be willing to take 9+ with Alcorn State. Alcorn State has actually won the SWAC regular season title each of the last 2 seasons. Now, they do lose a few pieces from a season ago. Someone like a Jeremiah Gambrell is really going to need to step up for this team, and you also do lose someone that I liked in Dominic Brewster as well, so that has been a little bit tough. But that said, I do think that you are going to be able to get just enough out of this backcourt to be able to hold in this game against an Arkansas State team that has a lot of talent Brian Hodgson comes in after he was an assistant at Alabama and has done a nice job of being able to recruit a really good roster of just raw talent. Taryn Todd is a former Power 5 guy that has been able to give you 36 points in the first 2 games of the season. DeAndre Dominguez was over at UMass a season ago, shot 39% from 3, 8.5 points, 4.5 assists. As a 6'9", little bit of a combo player. You maintain Caleb Fields, Avery Felts from a season ago were really able to run the offense, but this team is not playing a single lick of defense at all, and that's absolutely killing them against an Alcorn St team in which, is greater than the sum of its parts, and they do need to step up on defense. You got someone like a Byron Joshua, who's a nice double-figure scorer. He's able to give you a steal or 2 per contest. This is an Alcorn St team that has only been turning the ball over 11.5 times per contest. They are doing a good job of being able to cut down on that front. They're going to have a little bit of a tough time down low because you've got Mikel Mitchell on the flip side who comes over from Arkansas. Mike Pajad, he's been able to step up after he saw limited minutes a season ago. He's been able to do a nice job being able to provide about 11 rebounds in the first 2 games of the season. And I do think that Alcorn State is going to be able to do a solid job against an Arkansas State team that's really looking to push tempo this season, but feels like they're getting out of sorts with about 13.5 turnovers per game. I did set my total at 146. Alcorn State, a little bit more of a controlled team, and I do think that they're going to slow down this Arkansas State team just a touch. So going to be taking a look at those points with Alcorn State and taking a look at the under. 306-535, 306-536. Abilene Christian is playing us a Prairie View. Prairie View is an underdog of between 13 to 14.5 points. Seeing a straight 15 out there as well. 142 to 143 is your total line. With Abilene Christian, going to make them an 11.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one to take the points with Prairie View. Prairie View is a team that they themselves have ranked in the top 50 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. 6 out of the last 7 years. They've gone away from that identity just a little bit, but I do like the fact that they bring in Charles Smith IV, who began his career at SMU and Old Dominion, was just not able to find his footing over there, but 2 seasons ago, at Old Dominion was more of around a 5.5 point score. He's been able to shoot for his career about 34% from 3, and that's big because Prairie View was a bottom 30 team in terms of 3-point shooting percentage a season ago. Nick Gonzalez, who comes over from Montana State 2 seasons ago, he was able to shoot in the high 30s from 3-point range as well. This team still is going to have its issues down low, but Javante Hawkins, he's been able to come over from Tarleton St. He's been able to provide a little bit of rough and tumble. He's able to generate some steals as well, as Prairie View right now not on the same level that we typically see Abilene Christian at, but for Abilene Christian, very oddly, they're averaging 4 steals per game, which that's not them. This is an Abilene Christian team that typically may go for a lot of steals and everything like that. They've got a lot of depth, and they have been going right around about 10 or so deep, with having Arion Simmons along with Ali Abdul-Diba be your main scorers with a combined 20 points per contest. You don't necessarily have that one primary rebounder for the team, Cam Steele. He was at last season, hasn't necessarily grabbed a lot of boards thus far, but for Abilene Christian, typically this is a very hit-or-miss team from 3-point range, but with them not generating a lot of steals, granted, they played against Oklahoma State and NC State to begin the season. It is a little bit odd, and we've seen Abilene Christian really slow down their tempo this season as well, and I do think that that means that we might be in for a little bit of a slog, a little bit of a sloppier game in general. I did set my total at a 139.5, so being able to get a 142 to a 143, diving in on the under. Prairie View, just not a great 3-point shooting team, and Abilene Christian is not either, and with Prairie View, I do think that they're going to do a nice job being able to force some turnovers in this ordeal, so we'll take 12 plus with them to go along with that under. 306-537, 306-538. Chicago State plays us to CSUN. Cal State Northridge finds themselves as a 1 to 1.5 point underdog, totals between 146 and 148.5, and with Chicago State made them the 2-point underdog. I'm willing to take CSUN outright on the money line. I absolutely love the hire of Andy Newman for the CSUN team. He had great success over at D2 San Bernardino, and he has brought a little bit more of an up-tempo style to the CSUN team. They scared the bejesus out of our good friends in Stanford a few days ago, and I do think that this is a team that in general is going to have quite a bit of success moving forward, as they were able to maintain a lot of their top scores from the season ago. Deshaun Allen Aikens, who was able to give the team a double-figure amount of points at 6'6", has some versatility. He's back. Deontay Polisic last season, he was able to log about 12.5 points, 2.5 assists, was a little bit of a nice do-it-all sort of guard for the team. He returns as well. This is not necessarily a team that is tremendous down low, but other than what you're able to get out of Jashawn Corbett, who's been able to give you about 8 rebounds per game the last 2 years at Chicago State, you don't have a lot of size there either. Wesley Cardin, he's your main scorer with about 17 points per contest, but losing Bryce Johnson has been big. He was a nice spot-up shooter for this team. You've had in the fold for quite a few years Kendrick Green, who's just never really been an elevator on offense. He, for his career, shoots about 34% from three-point range. He does an okay job of being able to dole out the ball, but just doesn't find himself in a lot of space, and you just need more out of A.J. Neal, a former top 250 recruit of Long Beach State. He's just never been able to develop, wasn't able to in the Big West, hasn't been able to here at Chicago State, while Brent Davis has been able to be a solid player. He was over at the Citadel to begin his career. Last year was able to log about 7 points per contest, shot in the low 30s from three-point range, and has been able to piggyback off of that success. But with CSUN, I think that they do a relatively solid job of playing even up on the glass, and I like the two transfers that came over with Andy Newman to be able to elevate this offense. I set CSUN as a 2-point favorite, taking them outright on the money line. Did set my total more around a 140. CSUN is looking to play more up-tempo, but Chicago State, over the last 2 seasons under Coach Gillian, has been one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. So taking CSUN outright on the money line, set my total at 140, so also diving in on the other under 306, 539, 306, 540. Lamar is playing out UT San Antonio. Meet me for the Roadrunners, who find themselves as a 1-point favorite in some books. I'm finding them as a 2-point underdog over at DraftKings, so flip of favorites there. Anywhere between 147.5 to 148.5 is your number, and I like Lamar in this spot. I set them as a 5-point favorite. Whether you're getting them as a favorite or an underdog, I'm going to be willing to take them. Hopefully we can get some plus money on a Lamar just money line play, but either way, I'm going to be in on Lamar. This is a Lamar bunch that I really feel like has improved from a season ago. They were able to bring back 4 of their top 6 scorers from a season ago. That should be able to keep them live in this game. And then you've got a UTSA team that they just look completely rudderless in general. Lou Ford has not necessarily been able to do the world's greatest job with regards to this roster. They're now in the American, and they're going to get destroyed out there in the American. You now have the 7-footer and Carlton Lingard Jr. available after he missed the first game or 2 of the season. That should be able to help out this UTSA team down low. But right now they're looking at Trey Edmonds, who last season over at Utah Tech averaged 3 points per contest as one of their main scorers. And that tells you right there where this team is at. Tristan Freeman was a tremendous player in the backcourt for this team a season ago. He's now in the fold, so they've been looking at Trey Fuller, a 6'6", a little bit of a combo player that began his career at Central Florida, to be able to elevate the team, as they're now passing on the reins as well to someone like a Christian Tucker to be able to dole out the ball. And to his credit, the team has only turned the ball over 8.5 times per game first 2 games of the season, though. And first game was against Western Illinois. That's not necessarily too tremendous. Meanwhile, for this Lamar bunch, you've got a lot of guys in the backcourt like BB Knight, like Javion Buckley, that have been able to combine for about 25.5 points per contest. Lamar is shooting 88% of the free throw line as well. And with the influx of foul calls that we've been seeing this season, that is actually quite significant. We've also gotten 7 steals in the first 2 games of the season out of Terry Anderson. Nice 6'6", little bit of a combo player that was a starter for the team last season. Shot 39% from three-point range. He might be the most versatile player out there on the floor. And then on top of that, you had a lot of injuries with the team a season ago with Adam Hamilton along with Valentin Kott, both being limited to fewer than 10 games. They're back. They should be able to do a nice job down low against the UTSA team that's clearly missing Jacob Germany down low. So I did set Lamar as a 5-point favorite. I am going to be willing to take them. And with UTSA, this team does not have a lot of 3-point shooting. I do think the UTSA is going to do a little bit better with Lingard on the glass, but at the same time, that should slow down UTSA a little bit as well. So diving in on the under and willing to take Lamar, whether they're a slight favorite or outright on the money line. And we wrap things up with 306, 541, 306, 542. Loyola Marymount plays us to Jackson State. Jackson State finds themselves as between 13 and 14.5 point underdogs. Your total is between 149.5 and 151.5. I did set this total at 145.5. I'm going to be looking at the under. Jackson State just dealt a really tough blow prior to the start of the season. Deshaun Ruffin, a former McDonald's All-American, being out for the season. That has led to Jackson State having to be a little bit more makeshift in the backcourt. I do like the way that Chase Adams is able to dole out the ball. Began his career at Portland at the non-D1 level over at Salt Lake City a few seasons ago. Was able to be a nice facilitator. He has resurfaced and has become a little bit of a better scorer after he was a pass-first guy, but you don't have a lot of go-to scorers. Ken Evans has been tremendous for Jackson State here in the first 3 games of the season, providing a combined 57 points. Nobody else has been able to average really north of 10.5 points per contest, and that's where that depth is really coming through. You were expecting a little bit more as well out of Alabama State transfer Jordan O'Neal, who last season gave out 8 points, 7 boards, a block and a half per contest. He's down to right around 4 rebounds per game without having Manziel in the fold from a season ago. This team does not have a lot of depth down low, and for Loyola Marymount, having Lars Tiemann, who comes in from Cal, and Cal was a rough program, but he's a 7-footer that's able to give you 5.5 rebounds per game. They should be able to win the battle down low. Couple that with Alex Merkveldez and Kelly Leu-Pape, pair of versatile players that are right around 6'6" to 6'8". They're able to pop threes. You have a couple of that as well with the NC Central transfer in Justin Wright, who was Mr. Wright a season ago, was able to provide about 16 points per contest, shot over 40% from three in each of the last 2 seasons, and the Gonzaga transfer and Dominic Harris has been tremendous in that game against Yale, which was a tough one for the team. He was able to provide 21 points. He was that go-to scorer. Loyola Marymount really doing a nice job of taking care of the ball as well. They bring in someone in Murray State and LSU transfer, Justice Hill, to be able to help out on that front. Team has been turning the ball over just 9.5 times per contest. They're shooting 36% from three, 53.5% from the floor. I think there might be a little bit of regression to that, but I do think that Jackson State in general can have a little bit of a tough time shooting from three, and they're currently shooting 62% at the free throw line with 16 turnovers per game. I do think that the Mount might be running into a little bit more issue with the Jackson State team that I think is going to be able to generate some steals, especially with being able to get a little bit over 2 steals per contest and just a shade over 10 points per contest as well out of Kavion Hunt in the backcourt. So did set my total 145.5, diving in on the under, but with this Jackson State team, been rough for them without Deshaun Ruffin. I'm willing to lay up to 15 with Loyola Marymount to go along with that under, and that'll wrap things up for the Tuesday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. A big thanks to Eli Becker, does amazing work over at HXCVB. Join me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. And if you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at Junior_41. Keep in mind, Larziam, to me does not matter. As per usual, please send these into the timeline. Other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, and I'm coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season. That means I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.